A beautiful old church in rural Iowa with a steeple 30 meters high. Can it be picked up and dragged across the rolling countryside without shattering into 1,000 pieces?
Still looking good. You got 3 feet on that opposite side there.
A fragile chapel nestling in a park in a city by the sea. Is she too frail to be uprooted? Heaven help the team entrusted with her move.
I'm worried about going straight to hell.
Both teams face hazards overhead.
It can arc up to 6 feet. You don't want to be touching anything on there right now.
And on the road below.
Needs to come to me just a little.
2 colossal churches. 2 teams with a mission to move them. 2 epic endeavors that will test the nerves of the people who dare to risk huge moves. Every day, giant buildings are picked up and moved across the American landscape as if they were toys. But it's a skillful and dangerous business delivering other people's dreams. This house is being moved over 300 kilometers from a city to a rural paradise. The owner of this house wants it shuffled to one corner of his land so that he can build 3 more homes in his garden. He's turning the house round so that the bedrooms will face away from his new neighbors. And the owners of this takeout in Tennessee want it moved to another part of town where the people will hopefully be hungrier. But a devout farming community in Iowa is contemplating a move of quite a different order. Built on a hill at the center of this far-flung community, Trinity Lutheran Church has been its spiritual heart for over 100 years. It's a cherished local landmark, one of the first structures the settlers of Lincoln built in 1884. For generations, life has revolved around worship at this altar. Here, the local farmers have blessed their births and marriages and paid their respects to the dead. But the congregation has dwindled from 250 in its heyday to just 13. So to be saved, the church must be closed and moved. Today, its final service is in progress.
But the one thing above all else we must remember is the church moves on. This church doesn't die today, it simply changes places. Today we're celebrating the 125th anniversary of Trinity Evangelical Lutheran Church. As much as I have taken care to preach in my sermons that this is only a building, it's a building that their fathers, and their mothers too, have in some cases spilled blood to build. Dear Christians, this church building is closed as a place for divine services. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Amen.
No longer able to support it, but not prepared to demolish their church, the remaining parishioners have raised the money to have it transported to a town with more worshippers. A wise but painful move.
Well, I'm sad it's closing, but I'm so happy
that it'll just always be, and I didn't tear it down.
The church needs moving 18 kilometers across rolling countryside to the town of Manning. The road is more suited to carrying a horse and cart than an 85-ton church. The man crazy enough to attempt to move the building, topped with a steeple 30 meters high, is Ron Holland.
If you wanted to relocate this church, there's probably 3 different ways you could do it. One would be to cut it in sections that's small enough to get down the road.
Heavy masonry structures are often dissected into smaller pieces when moved. This Greek Orthodox cathedral in Canton, Ohio, was too small for its congregation of over 300. They called in movers to cut the church into 2 pieces for its move across town to a larger piece of land. The movers left a 15-meter gap in between the 2 halves to create enough space to accommodate all its new worshippers.
The disadvantage is, of course, the drywall. You got to fix it all back up, re-put the siding on, and reinforce it again back where the cuts were made. So it's a job. The other way would be to tear it down like a carpenter would build it, piece by piece.
sprawling buildings are often completely dismantled before they are moved. This Tudor pub in Manchester, England, was taken apart plank by plank when it was moved across the city to make way for new shops. But reassembling the 25,000 pieces of the black and white jigsaw took much longer than the movers originally anticipated. The team was fired from the job, and it took the proprietor over 18 months to put the whole pub back together. But Ron's no jigsaw man. He'd rather try and move the whole building in one piece. Fearing for their beloved church, the locals take this news with a mixture of excitement and trepidation.
The thing I'm looking forward to the most is seeing it get safely the first, 300 yards? Whatever it takes down this hill and around the corner.
Keeping that thing level enough without coming off, that's got to be a concern.
I just think just seeing it go down the road and having to lift all the wires and make sure there's no trees and, you know, yeah. I just think it's going to be awesome just to watch.
2,000 kilometers away on Florida's Gulf Coast, another fine and fragile church is being sized up for relocation. In sunny Sarasota, the property business is booming. Over 40 blocks are being developed in the city to meet the demand for upmarket housing. This is a prime site, but a landmark building stands in the developer's way. Crocker Church is protected from demolition, so the city have pledged to move the church, parish house, and priest to a new site across town.
These are the oldest standing buildings today in Sarasota. When we first came to this section of town in '95, there were drive-by shootings. No cabs would come into the area at night. And over the last 10 years, it has regentified, and this is very prime property now.
Father Nylon has trusted the work to experienced heavy hauler Brett Johnson.
We've got just a couple of light cracks, but they were here before. See, there's one small hairline crack there. The far corner, see how it's separated?
Brett knows there are always snags with protected buildings. This one is no exception.
Usually, houses have partitions in them, and I wanted to come in and brace this. I wanted to X-brace it, but they wouldn't let me nail anything to the floor because of its historical significance. Without any partitions, you're carrying a big box. I mean, it's just with no structural integrity.
Not only is the church more fragile than he thought, but the route both buildings must travel is packed with obstacles, old and new.
No, I can't drive it straight out. We've got to go out to the north because that's an old historical graveyard. We can't go that way. We can't get down the street. We're on Florida Avenue here, they call this, but there's poles on each side of the street and we can't get between the poles. You see, or we'd have overhead lines in the way.
The church is 20 meters long. This will make negotiating corners through over a kilometer of city streets extremely difficult. And somehow Brett will have to get both buildings onto Route 41, one of the main roads linking Sarasota to Miami. Blocking it would cause gridlock. Brett wants to dismantle the church to make the move easier, but fears the wood might splinter.
The nails are old, and it's got old, what they call heart pine, old Florida pine. They were virgin trees. And when you put nails in that and then the wood dries, you can't disassemble it and reassemble it.
A more radical option would be to airlift the church across the city.
You could take a helicopter and try and pick a structure up and fly it from lot to lot. And a helicopter will pick up a 100-ton tank because it's such a concentrated load. But if you try and hook a helicopter to a building like this, the rotor blast is counteracting what you're trying to pick up.
Air forced down by the helicopter's rotors would push against the long expanse of roof, making liftoff difficult. So Brett's only option is to try to squeeze the church through the city intact. The project is fraught with difficulty. The triangular porch at the front of the church is supported by 4 columns firmly anchored into the ground. If Brett attempts to lift the church with the columns in place, they could drag the porch off the building. So he plans to take the columns out and replace them with T-braces secured to the top of the lifting beams. These will ensure that the forces are equally distributed when he lifts the building. Day 1, Brett goes to work. It takes 4 hours to jack the building up off its foundations. So far, so good.
Really, we're at about 20 inches, it looks like now. We only need a little over 30 to put our wheels in, so this one more push-up and we'll be ready for wheels then.
Now comes the first difficult bit. This church was not built upon rock, but in a bed of sand. Despite the jacking, it still sits in a deep hole. In theory, the best way of dragging it out would be to lay down a road of wooden planks in line with its entrance and pull it straight out. But the graveyard, with its sanctified ground and protruding headstones, lies directly opposite. The only other way out is through a gap in the trees to the side of the church. To get it through, the team will have to try to precision turn the wheels to spin the church around through 90 degrees. Once turned, they hope to have enough space to build the road and winch the church out of the hole.
Before we pull out of here, we'll actually turn it 90 degrees, and then we're going to pull it down the road backwards. Basically, with the front will be the rear going down the road. That way, when we pull onto the new lot, we can drive straight in.
Turning the church round is easier said than done. They start to spin the outside wheels around a central set that have been anchored with wooden chocks. It takes an hour to rotate the church through 2 meters. They daren't go any faster. The wheels could veer off onto the uneven sandy ground and sink. After 8 hours, Brett is pleased with his progress.
We're coming up a pretty hard incline. It's almost up out of the hole, we call it. You know, you start with a house in the hole, we're bringing it up, so it's just about to come up the hill there now.
Before the final pull, they savage the neighbor's fence and trees to clear the route in front of them. They take the strain. And finally, up it comes out of the hole. But now the real problems start. Brett thinks the steeple may be too fragile for the trip across the city. Back in Iowa, Ron Holland is contemplating how his team is going to lift and shift their 85-ton church. They've ordered 14 steel beams that they will use to construct a rig to lift the church off its foundations and slide it to the roadside. But this building presents particular problems. The church is not evenly balanced. The front has the steeple, the organ, and a balcony, and is much heavier than the rear altar end. Furthermore, the floor is raked at an angle so that worshippers at the back can see the altar. If they were to raise the church up unevenly, the steeple could exert fatal pressure on the walls and roof. To compensate for this, they'll have to set the steel lifting beams underneath the church at exactly the right angle with the ground to create a wedge, so that when the jacks are operated, the church lifts evenly.
You know, the floor's angled down like most churches. You know, when you walk on the inside of a church, it goes down about 3 foot to the front. And that's what makes it hard for us to be able to shim it all at the same, so we're lifting all at the same time. We have to shim that 3 feet compared to the other end, hardly anything at all.
Inside the church, there's another problem. The haulers are unsure whether the ornate stained glass windows will survive the road trip, but they are reluctant to remove them. The problem is that the church is so long that its thin walls will bend and twist en route, which will put pressure on the glass. Traditional plate glass windows are often taken out of buildings before they are moved. It's recognized they won't survive the snaky undulations of a rough journey. But the windows of Trinity Church are different. The stained glass has been secured into position with malleable lead. The movers are gambling that they will be flexible enough to bend with the church rather than shatter, but they can't be sure. As an extra precaution, they decide to insert a second layer of steel beams under the floor to give the church extra rigidity.
The cross beams are going to be wider than the church. Basically, you want to be sure and get out to the outside sill of the church. And so I've got longer ones than what is really needed. And that will help strengthen that so you don't get a racking motion in it.
But just as they finish securing these lifting beams, they hit a new problem. They discover that the wood at the base of the steeple is completely rotten.
I'm not sure if it's just from dry rot or just rotting out, or if termites got in here.
No, it's not termites, it's dry.
It's dry rot. Okay. From the steps out here, the water used to run down and get back between them, and it just stayed there, and it just slowly got them rotten over the past 100 years. We're going to cut these old bridge planks to fit in here, and then shim up underneath to get everything tight and solid again.
Doing the repair sets them back half a day. It takes them a week on site before they are ready to jack up the church. Over the course of the day, the church rises up 2 meters into the air. But now it gets more difficult. How to slide the church sideways through the air onto firm ground to the point where a truck can pick her up. First, they must build 3 piers or cribs to support 3 super strong steel beams for the church to slide across. Each beam is 17 meters long and must be perfectly aligned with its neighbor.
We're measuring the distance from the last beam to this front beam so that the beams are straight, so the church sits straight on the beams, not crooked. We like it flat, level, so that way it won't roll back or forward when we're pulling it.
But how will they actually slide the 85-ton church across such narrow beams? The answer is to use a special set of wheels.
It's called a heavy haul skate, and it's going to roll the church from there over to these cribs here. It's a little heavy, so give me just a second here. It's real heavy. It weighs about 200 pounds. And these will go on each crib that we built underneath there. One to the far crib, one to this crib. And then we're going to make sure these are nice and square, even, off each edge of this beam.
This is what's supposed to happen. 2 sets of rollers will be placed under the church on each beam. 2 trucks positioned at the side of the church will then winch the front and rear simultaneously. It's critical that both ends of the church roll at exactly the same speed to keep the building at a perfect right angle to the beams. But it won't be easy. The front steeple end of the church is much heavier than the rear. If the back travels faster than the front, the rollers could run loose and the church would slide off the rig.
It's a lot of weight going to be coming this way.
They set the church rolling, but immediately their worst fears are realized.
Better hold up, Bernie. I'm still moving this way. Everything's heading that direction.
The rear of the church starts to roll, but the front with the heavy steeple is refusing to budge. This makes the rear rollers career off towards the very edge of their beam. They must reset the rollers at the center of the beam, or the church could fall off the rig. Some hopeful hits with a 10-pound hammer aren't going to make much impact on the 12-ton steeple overhead. It takes 2 hours to get the jacks out and reposition the rollers by hand. Eventually, they're ready for another go. The winches take the strain, and this time, the miracle happens. The steeple keeps pace with the rest of the church, and Trinity rides gracefully through the air across the rig. But the steeple has proved to be a dangerous liability. They are not sure they can risk moving such an unbalanced load across rough country roads unless they cut it off. Back in Sarasota, Brett has steeple problems of his own. He fears the steeple on his church is too fragile to survive the move if he leaves it in place, but it may fall apart if it's removed. He decides to risk taking it down.
My guys are up there just bracing it up. We're kind of beefing it up a little bit so it doesn't crush. They're nailing some cross supports in there.
Brett thinks the safest way to lift the steeple off intact will be to use a crane. He plans to thread 2 straps underneath its base and then to hoist it vertically off the roof. But its base is weak and its decorative louvered sides are equally flimsy. If left unbraced, the force of lifting could rip through the base and destroy the tower. So Brett's team must build a rigid platform around the tower's base. This spreads the lifting force across a larger area and protects the steeple. But once off the roof, Brett knows the 6-meter tower will be dangerously unstable and could fall out of the rig. The only way to reach and secure the top of the tower would be to fly a man up there on a wire and lower him down using the crane. He could then wrap a belt around the tower whilst ensuring that the main lifting straps are kept vertical. In theory, the tower could then be gently lifted to the ground. Preparing to fly is rigger Andrew Goodman.
And in theory, we are secure.
In theory.
Crane operator Steve Farah hoists Andrew 15 meters into the air like a fish on a line.
I'm scared. Someone help.
Then he gently lowers Andrew down behind the crucifix to avoid tangling his ropes or impaling him on the cross. The sharply raked roof makes touchdown tricky.
Right now, they're just going to hook it all up, and then we're going to have to snug up the straps, then he's going to put that ratchet strap on.
Both lifting straps have to be adjusted to exactly the same length to guarantee an even lift.
I'm going to pull up. You stay in the center, maintain your elevation.
From the crane, Steve tensions the belts, and from his high vantage point, Andrew can guide him.
The outside strap is shorter, so it wants to come this way.
The strap length is not exactly right, so we can't shorten a strap, so we're going to use shackles and just lengthen the ones that are apparently just a tad short so that we lift it completely straight.
Cutting the longer strap down to size might weaken it, so they hook extra belting to the shorter strap to extend it.
He's checking the tension on the straps now to make sure that when we do lift, that we lift evenly on all 4 corners.
One more or 2 more?
They spend an hour fine-tuning until they think they've got it right.
I don't know, this is pretty tight over here.
It's looking good right now. He'll tell me if it's good enough.
Andrew secures the tower top with a ratchet belt.
What's going to happen is the whole thing is going to lift away from the building. The top is unsecured. But now that we have this strap, in theory, the whole thing will be contained by this one strap.
Everybody ready? Okay, here we go. We're going to lift it a little bit.
The moment of truth.
Up it comes. Nice and smooth, completely controlled.
Steve handles the steeple as gently as a crate of eggs.
It was good. It went real well. We didn't crush anything, did we? I like that. We need to pick it up. They forgot to leave it for the straps. You need a bar, Jesse?
And now for the parish house. Andrew's first job, to remove the cross from its roof, has him feeling distinctly uneasy.
Okay, is the sky going black? Okay. Please forgive me.
Andrew feels better once the cross is safely restored to Father Nylon. As church and house are prepared for moving, the steeple is taken on ahead to check out the 1 kilometer route. Brett has trouble maneuvering even this modest load through the streets of Sarasota. They have to zigzag to avoid hitting traffic lights.
You got it. You come straight. You got it, Kyle.
Push wires up out of the way.
Yeah, go ahead, folks. Go ahead. Come on. Go ahead. Go ahead, ma'am.
They even fall foul of wet paint on the road.
Oh my gosh, look at my tires. Where'd the yellow paint come from?
But both church and parish house are far longer, taller, wider, and heavier than this trivial load. The most difficult part of the move is about to begin. In Iowa, Art is still not sure what to do about Trinity's cumbersome 30-meter tall steeple.
There's kind of two options. One of them is to leave the steeple on. The other one is to take and cut it off at the roof line and lift it off with a crane and then reassemble it. The advantages of is it would lighten the front up considerably, but then it is going to leave the steeple open to the weather if you can't get it sealed up good enough.
But severing this particular steeple would have serious consequences. In 1913, a tornado struck the church. When it was completely rebuilt, the connection between church and steeple was deliberately strengthened to withstand any future storms. The connection between steeple and tower is made by a square of solid wooden beams half a meter thick. Metal ties secure this joint. If they were to sever the steeple above this sill, the huge hollow spire would lose all its strength and deform. But if they cut off the spire below the sill, the cavernous bell tower would be weakened. So they have no option but to risk the journey with the steeple intact.
But then leaving it on with that added weight, I've got to put extra wheels in. So tomorrow we'll be putting a T-iron and 2 more sets of dollies up front there.
Art's team will now have to design a unique wheel layout under the church that can take the steeple's extra weight.
Yep.
Ideally, they'd like to use just 4 sets of wheels. The fewer wheels they use, the easier and faster it will be to get the load round tight corners. But the weight of the steeple is so heavy and localized that the front wheels could sink into the gravel road. To prevent this from happening, they will have to place 2 extra sets of wheels directly under the steeple. This will spread the weight of the church over a larger area and will protect the road, but it will make cornering more laborious.
We've tried to divide the weight, the total weight up into thirds. It's 1/3 here and 1/3 here and 1/3 here.
With 62 wheels in place under the rig, the team makes sure everything inside is secure for the move tomorrow.
Everything looks good here. I don't think we're going to interfere with anything here.
Okay.
I think we're in good shape there, don't you, Russ?
I think so, too.
After weeks of hard work, Trinity is finally ready for the road. Tonight's the night for Brett in Sarasota. He's been told he'll have to move his 2 buildings in the middle of the night to avoid jamming up the city roads. He's taken the bad news well and has made some special door tags to warn locals.
It's just to let people know, if they're not home, that we've been moving a house down your street in the morning.
When are you moving in?
We're leaving over on 10th at 2 in the morning.
Super. I can guarantee my wife I'll be on church on time.
Oh, there you go.
Brett can't start before 2 a.m., but his permit expires at 6. If the church and parish house are not through the city by then, he may never be allowed to work here again. His first task is to guide both buildings up the city street to Route 41, but this won't be easy. The route is lined with traffic light arms that have been specially built to survive hurricanes, so they cannot be removed. To get around the first set of lights, he must haul the convoy across the center of the road and onto the opposite sidewalk. There will be very little clearance as he snips through. Brett tries to explain his problems to the police.
Hey, I tell you what we got to do. The way these light arms are laid out, we got to cross the curb, go over to the westbound side. Then when we get in the middle of Coconut, then we'll cross over. We'll miss those light arms. You'll see we'll cross over the street, I think, and then we'll have to cross back over the curb to get on the right side. Hopefully we can do it in a couple hours. I'd like to be off the road by 4 and go to breakfast early. I'd love to see that. Watch that chimney, Joe. Just keep it steady.
They ease their path across the center of the road by building a ramp from wooden boards. Both buildings are extremely fragile, and a sudden jolt could loosen an entire wall.
And it needs to come to me just a little. Is that what you did? Okay.
Brett's son, Kyle, motors the house up front.
Kind of easing along real slow so they can keep up with it.
While Jesse wrangles the church. The heavy humidity drains their energy.
Boy, it's hotter than hell in here. Chimney's sticking up pretty far.
After a grueling 30 minutes, they manage to get through just one set of lights. But Brett seems happy.
Looks like we're running pretty good, doesn't it? Just for eyeballing it on the lot. Doing good.
But up ahead lies the turn onto Route 41. This junction has 4 light arms, and the road corners are blocked with lamps. The loads are too long to turn onto Route 41 at this corner. So Brett's team will have to zigzag across Route 41 and drive their trucks off-road into Centennial Park to begin the second stage of the move. It's 3 a.m., and as the convoy crawls up to the junction, Brett has a new worry. He now thinks the church may be too long to shoot the gap.
Church is about 65 foot, so we don't have a whole lot of maneuvering room there when we cross over. We're gonna have to jump up on the curb here.
All right, on the right side? All right.
To make sure we miss that arm. We've got to get far over to the right and jump up on the sidewalk a little bit to make sure that the 2-story misses this light arm here, so we've got another arm to miss.
With 4 light arms to snake around, everyone's attention focuses upwards. Brett keeps an eye on the window as it scrapes by the first lights.
I'll tell you when your dolly's there. We've still got about 15 feet to go, Kyle. I think you're good here.
But just as the parish house clears the obstacles in the air, it runs into problems on the ground. No one saw this fire hydrant coming.
Gotta get the jack machine and jack it up. We're gonna hit this fire hydrant out here. Lacking a few inches, so.
Meanwhile, Jesse's easing the church up onto the sidewalk to miss the first set of lights. But he too runs into problems. With over 50 tons pressing down on these tires, running over the bolts in this road sign base would cause a blowout, and their makeshift ramp is collapsing. Both buildings are now blocking Route 41, the interstate highway, and the police are fretting.
Time is 3:46. So what, 15 minutes they've moved it 5 feet.
With time pressing, Brett races in the jacking machine to raise the house away from the hydrant.
Lines up to the dolly. We can
push it up and get over the fire hydrant. Okay.
They pull clear, but the setback has cost them 30 precious minutes.
Got it made. Got it made.
Meanwhile, Kyle and Bo build up the ramp under their truck wheels to get the church moving again.
Come on, starting to turn now. We're gonna make it.
With both buildings rolling free, they complete the zigzag across the 41 and pull into Centennial Park. They've made it halfway, but now have just under 2 hours left to complete their journey. It's 8 a.m. in Iowa and the day of the big move. Ron alerts his team to the dangers of the 18-kilometer journey ahead.
The route, I think we've all went through the route. The trees have already been trimmed. We do have some hills that's going to give us possibly some problems. There's some real rolling hills. That's when we'll need to hook the tractor up, so we'll use the tractor only on the hills when we need it. One other thing we want to discuss, Ole always carries a hammer or something, and if there's anything you see that isn't right or an obstacle or whatever it is, tap on the beam and that vibrates right up through the truck. The truck driver knows immediately he'll stop.
The local police have given Ron the 10 hours until sunset to complete the move. His first challenge is to guide the church down the steep hill to the main road. It's a tight squeeze past the electric pylons lining both sides of the road. The church roof and steeple are topped with steel, and Ernie's particularly worried about the danger they pose.
You wouldn't want to touch any part of that church right now.
Why not?
Because it could be energized from that pole, even without touching. It can arc up to 6 feet. It'll energize that church, any part of it, even the wood. So you don't want to be touching anything on there right now. Not when we're that close.
They creep down the slope at a snail's pace. A sudden jolt down this 10% gradient could loosen the steeple. They make it to the main road without incident. Here, the road turns sharply to the left. Ron now has to work out the best way of steering his unwieldy cargo around the corner.
I'm thinking we should keep the truck over close to that graph, but not so far that you're going to slide either, aren't you know? Because it might be hard to back this thing up the hill.
To help keep the church on course, the rear wheels are connected by a steel spacer bar. It's tensioned precisely, allowing enough give for the wheels to follow the direction of the truck without veering off course. But the corners of the road are too tight for the wheels to get round with the spacer bar in place. So at each junction, they must be disconnected. They loosen the chains locking the wheels together and turn them round by hand through a tighter arc. With the wheels free steering, they can make much sharper turns. But the team must be vigilant. If the wheels spin too far, they will become difficult to realign once round the corner.
If I want to turn to the left, I come over here to this one that's on the left-hand side as you're backing up, and you tighten this one, loosen that one, and the dollies will come left. If you want to go right, it's just reversed. You go over there, tighten that one, loosen this one, and it will steer. So you can steer the back end.
After each corner, they must reconnect the bar to keep the wheels properly aligned on the straight sections of road.
You want them chained up tight or just
No,
chained?
just like we are. I think that'll be good enough.
The church is much wider than the country roads, so an advance party goes ahead to clear the roadside. They haul road signs clear of the steelwork protruding under the church.
Watch your windows, guys. tighter. Of course. Oh!
They take no prisoners. Trees that stand in their way are totaled.
Everybody might want to move. They're going to push the tree this way, okay?
20 hours of double check.
A crew of 12 electricians stand by to cut any offending wires clear of the steeple.
Close out this line for you guys to get under.
It's critical they keep the church level, or the steeple could work itself loose away from the main structure. The hydraulic wheels automatically compensate for small bumps and dips, but they must stop at steeply banked corners to level the load precisely.
We're on 3 points, so it'll follow the terrain of the road because the ground is never flat, you know, so it's got to be, the church is staying flat, so it'll lean, it'll follow the terrain of the ground up the hills, down the hills, the side a little bit, to the other side a little bit, yeah. It's got to be made to do that or you'll twist the building, you'll rack the building.
An hour into the journey, they come to a halt at the foot of the first major hill. There's loose gravel on the road, so they may not get up it.
Gravel has a tendency to lose traction. It'll slip because it's like you're driving on marbles. You don't get the traction as if you were on blacktop concrete.
Ollie has persuaded a local farmer to lend some extra pulling power.
We don't know which hill we need help with until we get there because we're not from here, I'm sorry to say.
With the extra 450 horsepower hooked to the truck, they begin the ascent.
I don't even know what it weighs, but it's got to be heavy. Plenty of power, plenty of traction. We shouldn't have any trouble.
Once back on the flat roads, they pick up speed. It takes the whole morning to reach the halfway mark, but they'll have to do better than this if they're going to deliver the church on time. In Sarasota, Brett's church and parish house are still stuck in the park, waiting to get onto Route 41. He's 2 hours away from violating the terms of his permit, and there's a worrying problem under his feet.
There's a big storm drain that goes under here, and it's right under that sidewalk, so all the water drains through here.
There's no direct exit from Centennial Park onto Route 41. Their only option is to drive over the ditch and sidewalk onto the road. But directly under the sidewalk is a network of hollow storm drains used to channel floodwater away from the city. If they were to drive the 50-ton church and parish house over this path, there's a risk the drains could collapse under their weight. So they will have to build a reinforced road over the sidewalk from steel plates. This will spread the load over a larger area and will make the journey across the ditch smoother.
Right there.
They start to lay the plates down, but each weighs over half a ton, and it all takes valuable time. The trucks finally roll down onto Route 41 with just 90 minutes to go before their road permit expires.
If we get on 12th, we're gonna be home free then. No, I'll feel better to get off the state road. Okay. We've got till 6. What, we got 4:30 now?
Yeah.
Right.
4:30.
Crossing the center of the road for a second time slows them further, but the wide highway allows Kyle and Jesse to pick up speed. They keep both the buildings close together as they shuffle up the highway.
4:48, it's 10 till. We've got an hour now. We've gotten through most of our obstacles. We just got this, man, it's gonna be a pretty hard turn on the 12th.
They reach their highway exit at 5 a.m., but the turnoff is sharp and their slow progress is worrying the police.
It's 5 o'clock.
And?
And they're not done.
It takes 30 minutes to haul the house clear of the highway and onto the side road, but the church is still behind. The morning traffic is building up and the police are having to direct cars away from the highway they're blocking. The moment the church clears the near side of the highway, the police reopen it to traffic.
What time is it? Are we close to 6 yet? Well, we got 5 minutes to get off the road.
So close to being out of the road, yet so far. I don't know why they've stopped there. It looked like they were on a roll there.
They must shuffle the house further down the side road before the church can move any further. But trees are blocking its path.
Okay, Jesse, get this bad boy out of the road. All right, we're ready.
Just after 6 a.m., the church leaves the highway.
Yeah. All right, getting the order to open the highway. We're done.
We're out of the road now.
Both buildings finally reach their destination as day breaks.
Once again, thank you very much,
All right,
Mr.
you're welcome.
Johnson.
All right.
Good man.
Thank you, Jim.
We appreciate it.
Crocker Church is saved. The steeple soon reclaims its rightful position, and the church is restored to its former glory. It's 1 p.m. in Iowa, and Trinity is on a roll. The team pick up the pace to 6 kilometers an hour and race to get it to its new home by sunset. Captain Lance Evans arrives to escort the church on the final leg of its journey.
We don't normally do things this big. We've moved all sorts of things from windmills to boats to houses to and now churches.
The good people of Manning are overwhelmed to receive this very special present from across the prairies.
I've never seen something this big go across my house before.
This is just fantastic to move that big thing.
Bet if any of these people are from the big cities, they think, look at those hicks. They think this is a big deal.
We're going to attempt to go over the bridge, which is going to be the interesting part of the whole turn.
Still looking good. You got 3 feet on that opposite side there.
After 6 hours, Ron's team guide Trinity up the hillside to its new home. The owner of this estate wants every single building moved to an identical position half a kilometer away. Can a team of engineers meet this extraordinary demand?
If they're not the way they are today, then it's different.
The owner of this house, crammed in the center of town, wants to move it to a larger lot in the countryside. Can movers haul it 30 kilometers without wrecking the streets? The teams face danger on the roads.
Get over!
And ferocious storms. Two huge historic homes. Two teams with a mission to move. Two tough endeavors that will test the nerves of the people who dare to risk huge moves. Historic buildings often have to move to keep up with life in the 21st century. This abandoned church will find a new life as a theater in a different town. While this old railway depot is being hauled away from the trackside to become a museum in a historic park. Occasionally, a building finds itself standing on a highly prized piece of land. Rose Heat's family have occupied this farm estate on the outskirts of St. Louis, Missouri for over 100 years.
It was passed down through the generations from my great-grandparents to my grandparents, from my grandparents to my mother and my uncle, and finally to me.
It's very much more than just a piece of property. It's family.
In 1959, a highway was built across the family farm, turning the land into prime real estate. For 3 decades, Rose has been fighting off developers who want to build a shopping mall on her family's home. In a final attempt to persuade her, developers offered to move Rose's farmstead to a new location.
I guess the debate was if the opportunity arose that we could move the homestead and preserve it, then that was the decision that needed to be made.
Rose agreed to the move with one extraordinary condition: that every historic feature on the estate, from the dilapidated barn and numerous outbuildings, to the farm's sophisticated alarm system, 130-year-old fence, even the disused toilet, should all be moved with the main farmhouse and be realigned on the new site in exactly the same position.
I thought it was important that all the buildings be as they are today, because if they're not the way they are today, then it's different, and it's not the same homestead as it was on the location we are today.
They will relocate the entire farm complex half a kilometer to the east. Behind the mall, they will build a mound to conceal the development from Rose's view. Moving all the buildings, including Rose's 400-ton stone farmhouse, will be an immense challenge for mansion mover John Matico.
The first way you could move this building is if you took it into sections. You took the one rectangular section and you cut it, and then you took the other rectangular section. Did that, you're cutting through all of the roof system, the plumbing, the electric, the plaster. It's not a viable option because of the time constraints that this move is on. The second way this building could be moved is brick by brick, slate shingle by slate shingle, roof truss by roof truss. But again, that's an option that the homeowners would never even consider because of the massive amount of disassembly and reassembly.
It took movers in Stockton, England, an entire year to relocate this church, brick by brick, away from a noisy railway line. They hauled it 25 kilometers to a more tranquil location. Anxious to spruce up its grimy exterior, they reassembled all the walls inside out. John has just 4 weeks to complete the farmhouse move, so is rejecting this time-consuming option. This leaves him with just one high-risk strategy: move the entire homestead intact.
It's a masonry building. It's 16 inches thick walls. Estimated weight around 600 tons. It's going to be a difficult and challenging move.
Whilst Rose is relocating her home to maintain its views, the owner of this historic house in Nova Scotia, Canada, wants to swap her view for a more attractive vista. Dr. Catherine Finlayson runs a veterinary practice in the East Coast fishing town of Pictou. She's fed up with the 30-kilometer commute from New Glasgow, but is reluctant to leave her 100-year-old home.
I have to be very close to where I work because of situations like emergencies. And I actually had tried to sell this house for probably about a year, and nobody really was interested in buying it. One, because it was quite large. Two, because it was right on the street. And three, I think, because of how close it is to all of the other homes. So there's not a lot of privacy anymore. And I just really, really liked this house and thought there's no way I'd ever be able to build one that would look just like it. So I thought, well, I will look at possibly moving it.
To transplant her townhouse to the country, Catherine's called in local house mover Jason Leal. He's working out how to move the huge wooden structure.
We got 3 different options to moving a building of this size. Our first option would have been if we were out in the country or somewhere where we had a lot of space, we could move the whole building in one piece.
Moving the house intact is the best way to preserve its character and integrity. But this is only possible if the route is unobstructed. This 4-bedroom home in Illinois is moving across the road in a single piece. There's plenty of space and just one set of wires in its path, so the move takes under an hour. But the streets of New Glasgow are packed with obstacles.
If we didn't have to move a lot of wires, we didn't have to move a lot of poles and everything, it would be a great option. We'd put it on our trailer and we'd go with it, but just due to the location, that's not gonna, we had to eliminate that option. Second option to moving a house of this size is we could tear it apart.
Wooden structures are often dismantled plank by plank to move long distances. This 160-year-old windmill was disassembled and shipped from Denmark to Iowa for preservation. The 2,000-piece jigsaw took a team of 300 people more than a year to put back together. Dismantling Catherine's 3-bedroom house would take even longer. So Jason has only one option left: to cut the house in half. The man who will dissect it is carpenter John Stoddage.
Well, this house was built in 2 pieces. We have the main part of the house here, and then this smaller piece here is kind of built onto it. We're going to cut it in this area here and take this smaller piece. We've decided to cut along this wall for the simple reason that if we were to cut through the middle, it would leave floor joists from both sides sagging and need support. So the whole house would just kind of, tip in the middle.
The team is making 2 incisions through the house. The first one is vertical. They'd like to slice the building in half to minimize the width of each piece and make the move through the tight streets easier. But cutting directly down the middle severs all the floor beams, jeopardizing the structural integrity of the house. A less risky strategy is to cut the building just off to the right, bracing each open section with wood for support. This maintains the building's rigidity, but makes the move of the bigger piece of the house more difficult.
Horizontally, we're going to cut the second floor below the windows. More important than anything, I think, is the size of the piece, just to make sure that our height remains somewhat the same in the 2 pieces.
The second cut will be horizontal, slicing through the house just under the first floor windows. This preserves the windows that are old and fragile, but makes the top half slightly taller than the bottom. And the cut line causes problems inside the house too. It passes through the staircase, banister, and upstairs door frames, which will need removing before the team can dismantle the house.
Nervous about the floors and the banister and the fireplace. And I told them that from the beginning, that if they thought that the floors were going to get wrecked or the fireplace mantle or the banister, that I may not even be interested in moving it.
With over 400 pieces of woodwork to strip out, they devise a coding system to keep track of where everything belongs.
Well, each piece we're individually marking. Upstairs we've been labeling them with B's, and downstairs we've been using letter A.
Removing the woodwork is not their only task. All the water pipes need disconnecting too.
So within the building we have pipelines from each radiator, we have pipelines from toilets, to bathtubs, sinks, washing machines, dishwashers. So we alphabetically categorized so we know what job that pipe actually did, and numerically we know in what position of the building it's located.
There are over 30 meters of pipework concealed inside the walls and floors, weaving in between the sections to be cut. All need to be mapped out and removed before the house can be pulled apart into 4 separate loads. They cut away the wall plaster to reveal the wooden skeleton that they will dissect.
The bottom 4 feet of all the walls on the second story open so that it'll make our cut a lot easier and we can see anything that might be in the way. So as we come around the wall here, of course, we're going to try and cut below the window somewheres in this area so that we don't have to take the windows out.
Looks like a big tornado hit it.
The radical surgery comes as a shock to Catherine.
This is a mess. This is very sad. I better fix it.
Back in St. Louis, the team are beginning the daunting task of relocating Rose's historic farmstead. Their first challenge is to map out the positions and elevations of every historic feature on the farm.
All right, boss, we got an 812 here, 812.
They plant a grid of markers around the grounds and precisely locate each one with GPS. They plot the corners of each building across the grid, creating an accurate map of the foundations. They transfer the grid to the new site and use it as a reference to replot the foundations so each building can be perfectly realigned with the others.
1830.
Rose would like to be able to look out her kitchen window and see the barn in the same place, and from the porch see the milk house and the steam shed in the same place. She wants the orientation of the sun, wants the sunlight to come in the windows the same way. So it's going to be picked up and moved some 1,700 feet to the east.
And it's not just the positions of the buildings they are recording.
Think there's any way that we could take this walnut tree with us?
Rose has called in landscaper Leanne Terry to move her entire garden as well.
Some trees can be moved. Some trees that have a fibrous root system to them are better candidates basically than this walnut. It has a taproot that goes straight down instead of a lot of a fibrous root system that helps hold the root ball. So you would basically be killing the tree because it would not be able to receive any water, any micronutrients or macronutrients which the tree needs to live.
Trees like elm and maple can be moved. They have wide fibrous roots spreading out just below the surface of the ground. They can be raised on a steel rig and hauled to a new site by crane for replanting. But walnut trees are different. They have a deep taproot stretching up to 2 meters into the ground. These can be too long and sensitive to remove intact. And some trees are just too old to move.
The age of trees makes a huge difference. And with this tree itself, it's probably close to about 100 years old, which trees are basically a lot like people. Whenever we're 40, we don't mind change. Change is adaptive. We can adapt to that. Whenever we get about 70, we don't adapt quite as easy. Typically, trees that are about 70 years old and older do not adapt nearly as well as younger trees do.
Leanne is labeling over 300 specimens to keep track of their original position. She has to replant them all at the new site in the same orientation. Meanwhile, John's preparing to move the 5 outbuildings. Each one poses a different problem. He's sizing up the rickety barn first.
On this building, or any barns, in many cases, they're tougher to move than a house because there's no actual flooring system to tie the building together. And it is a sprawling barn. It's 68 foot long, it's 37 foot wide.
Inside, the barn is divided up into a series of hollow chambers. The walls are falling away from the roof and dirt floor. If they were to lift the barn up unsupported, the inside would collapse. So they're installing a network of wooden cross braces inside to tie the walls and roof together for the lift. The milk house is also structurally weak. Its walls are built from 2 layers of brick. Over the years, the 2 layers have become separated. The exterior walls are falling outwards, while the interior walls are caving in. To prevent the milk house from collapsing, John's installing 2 networks of bracing. Wooden cross struts inside the milk house hold the interior walls rigid, while steel cabling prevents the exterior walls from falling away. Together, these hold the milk house rigid for the move. Braced and bolstered, the exodus begins. Hydraulic jacks prise the outhouses off the dung-encrusted ground. With a truck on the front and wheels under the rear, they drive the buildings half a kilometer to the new site.
1 down, 5 to go.
The machine shop is particularly fragile.
I'm just trying to go as easy as I can because this is like carrying a dozen of eggs across the rocky road.
Steel supports extend around the base of the narrow milk house to give it extra stability on the dirt road. The team are less worried about Rose's toilet. It takes a week to lift and move the buildings. At the new site, they slide the buildings into place, lining them up precisely with the surveyor's stakes. Moving Rose's 400-ton farmhouse may not be so easy.
I think it's incredible, and it went very quickly, faster than I would have thought. I think I'm going to have to be medicated when the house moves. Maybe a good shot.
Back in Nova Scotia, the movers are preparing to cut and dismantle Catherine's home into 4 pieces. They thread 8 15-meter-long steel beams through the house. These form a rigid platform under each section. Cranes hook onto the beams and prepare to lift each piece away. Jason is concerned that the exposed studs that form the walls may be too unstable to survive the lift.
Once we cut it, all the walls would be hanging from the roof trusses, and that would allow all the studs to swing whatever way they feel like. And they can bow in and they can bow out, and that's when you look down, you lie up the wall, and you'll see a wave, and it's just in and out and in and out.
Once cut, the upstairs walls will be separated from the first floor. If left unbraced, the free-hanging walls would buckle, causing damage to the plasterwork. To prevent collapse, they will build a steel skeleton inside both roof sections. This ties all the walls together and provides a rigid base for the lift.
This is a piece of channel iron, and what we use it for is bracing. It goes up against the wall, and we bolt it into the studs. And what that does is when we cut the upper half off, it keeps the building square.
With the walls braced, the carpenters can begin cutting the house into 4 loads. It takes 2 days for the team to sever through over 200 beams.
All the studs, except for the corner beams, there and over there and over there, are all cut.
Now they've exposed the house to the elements, they must finish the job quickly to avoid rain wrecking the home.
There's no delay with this one. We got to make sure we're ready to go, and we got to make sure we can do it right away.
They need 2 cranes to lift the roof, one positioned at the rear of the house, the second at the front, parked on the main road. But just as they try to park this crane in position on the street, disaster strikes. The crane's brakes fail. Despite the valiant efforts of the crew, the 35-ton crane continues to gather momentum down the hill. The driver does his best to dodge obstacles, but somehow he must bring the crane to a stop. As the crane accelerates, the driver is running out of options. Ahead, he sees a low railway bridge. He jams the crane under the bridge to bring it to a halt. Luckily, no one is seriously hurt, but everyone is shaken by the incident.
We have to move our crane.
The day after the crane accident, the movers in Nova Scotia receive more bad news. A hurricane threatens to strike.
The remnants of Hurricane Beryl is coming up on the east coast of Nova Scotia. And it could be a tropical storm, but it could go veer more to the east, and we could just get heavy rain and a little bit of wind. But in Nova Scotia, you never know what we're going to have for weather, so.
They call in another crane. They must dismantle and move the house as fast as possible to beat the hurricane.
Yeah, just 1 second.
Jeff!
The right side of the roof is wedged into the left at a difficult angle. The movers would like to pull away this piece first, but there's not enough space on this side of the house to operate the cranes. So the team must relocate to the other side of the yard and remove the left section of roof first. This will not be easy. They must prise off the left side carefully, or the right side could be ruptured and leak when put back together. It's an anxious moment for Catherine.
Oh well, we'll see what they do with it. They just better damn well not drop it, or they're going to build me a new house from scratch.
We're jammed up against this other piece. Come on up in your boom just a whisker more, will you?
We're slowly coming away. and just skim across the top of the wall until I get out enough that I can bring it up. Right there, she was holding out by these two side windows.
Okay, Jason, you come up in your boom a little bit. Come on up.
Spotters inside make sure the roof does not jam on the tall radiators as it swings out.
Everything look free, Jack? Before you swing, you gotta clear the radiator.
Over the course of the afternoon, they lower the roof to the ground, where it will be prepared for the move.
It came apart good. Over to go back together is easy.
With the storm advancing, the team is now under tremendous pressure to hit the road. Back in St. Louis, John's team are preparing to lift Rose's farmhouse. The stone walls are half a meter thick. Cutting holes in them for the steel lifting rig is proving difficult.
Stone is tricky because it's layered in such a way, if you take out a whole stone, you're really weakening the wall at one point, so you have to make a cut on it, and to make a cut on an 18-inch stone is really difficult.
They must keep the 400-ton farmhouse perfectly level throughout the lift. If it tilts or leans, the wooden veranda or porch attached to the main brick structure could be compressed under the weight. So they're building a steel lifting rig through the basement walls. Small needle beams prop up the wooden weak spots. These rest on cross beams supporting the floor. 3 main beams run the length of the house, bearing as much as 160 tons. Jacks pushing under these beams will raise the house off its foundations. They must remove as little masonry as possible to accommodate the steel beams, or the walls will lose their strength. They score each hole precisely before lifting away the stones by hand. It takes the team over a week to drill the 80 holes John needs to thread the massive lifting beams right through the farmhouse. With the beams in place, John's brother Joe packs them tight to the stonework so all the walls lift in unison.
All the beams are level now, so we have to fill in all these voids for the needle beams, the main steel, the cross steel, whether by wedging, shimming, or grouting, but we have to fill all the voids, so when we finally put it in a unified mode, everything's getting picked all at the same level plane.
They position 17 jacks under the rig. The building's 400-ton weight is unevenly spread, so each jack will lift a different load. Hydraulics link the jacks to a bank of pressure gauges. Here, John adjusts the force he applies to each jack so the building lifts up evenly.
Once they have the load of the building, we'll supply whatever pressure that the individual jacks will need to raise the building up in a unified plane.
John powers up the jacks one by one. The jacks assume the full weight of the building. A crack appears around the base of the house as it begins lifting up off its foundations.
All right, I'm getting a lift on this bay over here. We've gone up about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. So we have a uniform crack all the way around, which is a good sign.
The crack means the entire building is now free of its foundations and ready to be raised up clear of the basement walls.
It's all free, so now everything should come up in unison.
I just want to make sure it stays level. Otherwise, I can see everything toppling on the inside, and that would not be a good thing.
Right now, it's coming up.
Now they need to raise the building up 1.5 meters into the air so they have enough space under the structure to position the wheels for the move. Each time the jacks reach their full height, they transfer the weight onto a tower of wooden blocks so they can reset the jacks to lift again. As the building raises, they clear away the old foundations. Over the course of the day, the farmhouse rises up into the air. With the lift complete, their next challenge is to position 112 wheels under the house to propel it to its new location. With the storms in Nova Scotia advancing, Jason's team has no option but to try and move 2 sections of Catherine's house tonight. They have a narrow time window of just 5 hours to deliver the loads. With the hurricane forecast to strike Friday night, they need to move fast.
We're lucky right now. There was no clouds in the sky when the sun went down. So far, everything's going great for us, but it's Nova Scotia. It could change any minute.
Are we ready to go, Jason?
I'm ready to go, yeah.
Okay. Let's go, buddy.
The 30-kilometer trip sets off at walking pace.
You all right, Roy?
The roof is the widest and tallest of the 4 loads, and its angular shape is difficult to maneuver through town.
Everything all right up there, Chris?
Perfect. Take it to your right, Philip. You got good 3 feet there. Take it to your right. Give her that pole there.
You're by this stoplight here now. Keep going.
The team has attached wooden boards to the rooftop to ease the apex under the wires. But some junctions are so heavily entwined, they must pick their way through by hand. It's 2:30 a.m. before they ride out of town. It's taken 1.5 hours for them to travel just 3 kilometers, and there are still 27 more to go. Their road permit expires at 6 a.m., so they're desperate to pick up speed on the highway. Led by a police escort, they hit 50 kilometers an hour. But just as they get going, another obstacle looms over the horizon.
The other day there, Steve, and we should just straddle that yellow line, the center line, right?
Yeah, that's going to be your best bet, I think.
If the roof is too high to pass under this bridge, they may have to turn back and find an alternative route.
How high is his house?
Right now, 16.2 and a half.
And how high is the bridge?
16.2.
So what are you going to do?
The suspension in the truck, you can dump your air, so you gain about 2 or 3 inches. See, the road crowns too, eh? So he's going to gain a little bit there because the tire's on the outside of the crown. And the only part that's high is the very front of that. After about 2 or 3 feet of the front of that peak, then it starts sloping off again.
The lowest point of the bridge does not have enough clearance for the gable roof. But the team has realized that the road is not precisely level. It's humped in the middle. If they align the rig's wheels either side of this crest, they will gain the few vital centimeters of headspace they need to pass through.
Or do you think you'll make it?
It's going to be tight.
The rooftop scrapes the bridge beams.
Which one's on the side? This front side over here?
I heard something up there. I don't think we heard anything. The skid boards are running over top of each other.
The only thing it probably did was come up with the nails on the skid board.
To the relief of the team, they just squeezed through.
We've never been that close before.
But the hold-up has cost them precious time, and the first roof section does not reach the new site until 5 a.m.
I guess we estimated a little bit off. There was no mess-ups, no unseen problems, but just some things just end up taking longer than they're supposed to, right?
Their road permit has expired, so they must wait until tonight to move the second section of Catherine's house. After just 3 hours rest, the team are back at work. They are preparing the ground floor for tonight's move, so it can be reunited with its roof before the storm strikes.
They said Friday afternoon, late afternoon, it could start raining and then the winds could pick up. So we might just have to keep working tonight and right through and did the other two pieces over here, and then if they're here in the morning. And that's why we have to just keep going and working and working and working. And, you know, sometimes there's just not enough time to sleep and lay down, so you just have to keep going until it's done.
They hit the road just after midnight. This time they're prepared for the obstacles en route and deliver the first half of the ground floor to the new lot by 4 a.m. The first stage of reassembly begins after breakfast.
What we're going to do is we got the bottom half here. This is the piece we moved last night. We landed it next to the foundation, and now we're going to pick it up and set it on with the cranes.
Lowering an old house onto new foundations is precarious. The walls of the house are warped with age and may not sit evenly on the perfectly level footings.
We'll be lifting the top part as level as possible, and we want to bring everything down at the same rate. We don't want to put pressure and stress on one part of the building over the other. So as long as we keep it level and we bring the cranes down together, then we won't have that problem.
Jason must realign both levels of wall studs precisely. It's now late afternoon and he's running out of light. The slightest slip or tug between beams could cause the entire wall to collapse.
You ready, Chris?
Yeah, copy it. Okay, coming down on your end, just your end, nice and easy. Coming down. Oh, hold that a sec.
Pretty much bang on in that corner.
Over here.
It's coming back together really well.
They have over 100 wall studs to realign. Once lined up, the carpenters strengthen each joint with wooden ties. The team works through a third night, stitching the first two halves of the house together. But although the roof is now back on, the sides of the house are still exposed.
Hold that a sec.
Catherine watches anxiously, knowing the storm is just hours away. The movers have no time to lose. To complete the operation, they must rebuild the move rig for the second half of the house. If they reduce its width to under 6 meters, then they're allowed to travel on the road during the day. They lift the top floor carefully out of the way. They have to move the ground floor first so it can be positioned on the new lot before the roof section arrives.
The living room and dining room just went over the top of the roof.
Now the drivers are under enormous pressure to deliver both loads before the rain begins.
People haven't got a clue. You see an escort vehicle, it means there's something wide coming. Get over! Get over! Pull over to the side!
Despite working day and night for the past 4 days, the storm finally catches them. High winds make it too dangerous for the movers to crane the roof into place tonight. But meanwhile, the carpenters realize they have made a terrible error. They stacked up all the historic woodwork removed from Catherine's house on the upper floor level, which is now exposed to the pouring rain. They scramble in the gales to wrap the exposed building in a tarpaulin, but it's too late. Water is already pouring onto the antique woodwork and floors. The skeleton of the wooden structure could be permanently warped. The following morning, the storm has subsided, and they lower the last piece of Catherine's house into place. But the damage has already been done. The tarpaulin blew off in the night, and water has penetrated the ceilings and plasterwork. Catherine may have underestimated the risks of moving such a precious house.
I thought that they were going to cut it up and that they would bring it over and put it down, but I didn't think of some of the other things, like now I've got to get some new chimneys in place. Those are things I didn't think about, and it's kind of ruined right now. So the whole house, it's all cosmetics, I think. Once they fix the walls, it's just going to be a matter of painting it. So those are things that you just don't think about when you're doing these things.
Before Catherine can reclaim her home, they will have to carry out extensive repairs and rebuilding. Wooden ties will need installing to realign the warped wall studs. New wiring and pipework will have to be run through the entire house. All the walls need relining with plasterboard. Joiners will have to replace the original wooden features inside, damaged beyond repair. And new siding will need securing around the exterior of the house to seal it up from the elements. It will be some time before Dr. Catherine's house is restored back to its historic splendor. It's 8:30 a.m. in St. Louis, the big move day for Rose's farmhouse. A narrow dirt road half a kilometer long points the way to its new foundations. John alerts his team to hazards en route.
Make sure nothing gets grabbed on the hoses. Watch the blocks popping up with the boards. If you see anything, yell. Let your zone leader know.
Larry, you want to say a little prayer?
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together and accomplish this task. We pray that you be with each one here today and keep them safe. Amen.
All right, let's go move the house, guys.
It's an emotional moment for Rose.
Here's to a new day for an old house for many generations to come. Okay.
The weather is overcast, but rain holds off for now.
It's a beautiful day for moving. You know why? Because it's dry.
Their first task is to haul the farmhouse out of its deep foundations. An engine on the front powers the wheels underneath as they set off at a snail's pace. They must guide the wheels precisely along these narrow gangways to make it up onto the road.
The sooner we get off the boards, the better it is, the safer the job is, and there'll be a lot more smiles on guys' faces.
Fast and just right.
It's a tight squeeze as they inch up onto the road. Spotters around the house ensure the rig remains absolutely level.
Everybody's looking for, just watching your hoses, watching the distances in the hydraulic cylinders. You don't want any to either stroke all the way out or run all the way down flat. If that happens, you start hitting dead spots in your zones and it breaks up the plane, and that's when you start damaging the building. And so, yeah, it's best to just keep your eyes open, paying attention.
Once we get off of this hole, we'll be able to go a little smoother because we got to leapfrog all the boards and blocks up front to make our runway. So once we get on this gravel surface, we'll be able to stroll along pretty good. How are we looking in the rear? We looking all right?
It takes an hour for them to travel just 15 meters. At this speed, the move will take over 30 hours.
So far, so good. Got a long way to go, though.
We've got off our bridge, and we got it to steel plates and boards, and now we're getting ready to step off the steel plates and boards and see if the road holds up. If it doesn't, it's going to be a long trip.
Now the house is safely on the road, Jerry, John's uncle and lead driver, is anxious to crank up the pace.
I'm gonna get them sweating in a minute. You watch this. We just got to get over there before it rains.
Jerry picks up the pace, but they veer off course towards the softer edge of the road. It's critical they hold the building back on track.
Yeah, we got to start sweeping. We got to start easing that way. We'll be way too high up. That's the center of the road, these flags. What's he want to go? All right, tighten your side up, Will.
They must wrench the 112 wheels round with chains and pulleys to line the house up with the central, more solid part of the road marked with flags.
Need to come back to you about 2 extra.
With the constant threat of rain overhead, the team works frantically throughout the morning, hauling the house to the new site. The ramp down to the new foundations is perilously steep.
The main thing is to keep an eye on your jacks because the terrain or the grade will change pretty drastically here in the next 200-300 feet. So basically a lot of tape measuring and measuring the cylinders to make sure there's enough ram to allow for the change of grade.
They anchor heavy machinery to the rear to stop the house running away downhill. The building leans forward at a precarious angle as it descends the slope. Spotters circle on the lookout for cracks and falling masonry. Keeping in mind Rose's insistence that all the buildings must be perfectly aligned, the final stage of the move is the most critical.
2 foot.
They must line up the walls of the farmhouse precisely on the new concrete foundations. They use plumb lines hung from the corners of the house to make sure they hit the drop zone spot on.
1 foot.
It's coming over real nice. Ooh, cut back.
Come back, Will. Good.
Said his end's good.
4.
The stake's leaning. Straighten the stake up.
3.
Bring it on, Joe.
2. Pretty close.
Bullseye. John parks the house precisely on target.
Wonderful. It's good to see it back here and it's in one piece. I knew you guys would do it though. There was no question ever in my mind.
Rose's farm is saved. In the spring, the shrubs and trees will be replanted to restore the homestead to its original glory. In England, an entire subway line is about to take to the skies. The challenge? To thread a fleet of trains into a tunnel sealed at both ends. The deadline, 24 hours away.
Quite stressful as I'm looking at it.
In Canada, a salvage team battles to raise a plane that's been at the bottom of a lake for 75 years. They are miles away from civilization, so when things go wrong, they're on their own.
We got fouled. It happens.
Both moves are vulnerable to bad weather.
There's a lot more wind up there than down here.
Two massive machines.
Okay, up another 10, going up.
Two teams with a mission to move them. Two tough endeavors that will test the nerves of the people who dare to risk huge moves. London, one of the most frenetic cities in the world. Every day, over 3 million people descend into the oldest, longest, and one of the most overstretched subway systems on Earth, the Underground. Like a sprawling spider's web, 272 miles of track crisscrosses the capital. 13 lines link almost everywhere in London through a multi-layered labyrinth of tunnels. One of the busiest and shortest lines begins at Bank, deep in the financial heart of the capital. The Waterloo and City line runs under the Thames to the international transport hub of Waterloo Station. 40,000 people a day made this short 1.5-mile journey until April 2006, when engineers decided it was time to shut the line for an overhaul. Originally built in the 1890s, the line has been showing its age, so the old track has been replaced with new. After 5 months, the engineers are almost ready to reopen. There's just one thing missing: the trains. All the cars are being refurbished 190 miles to the north in the rail town of Doncaster. There is just time for some last-minute checks before this gleaming flotilla of Waterloo and City trains sets off for London. Getting them back down the tunnel is the responsibility of Alf Arnold.
I've got these 20 carriages here, and that comprises the whole fleet of the Waterloo and City line, worth about £1 million each. And the problem we've got is that we've got to get them back to London safely, without any marks or anything else, to get them working for the Waterloo and City line return to service.
The most obvious way back to London is to use the overground railroad that passes right by the yard. The cars could be back in the city in a few hours. But this idea is flawed. There are only a few places where trains can cross from the overground rail network onto the underground. This allows direct access onto every line, except the Waterloo and City line. How about transferring trains between lines? 6 lines converge at Bank Station. It would seem like the obvious transfer point. But going underground reveals why this will not work. All the lines are at different depths, with no linking tunnels between them. It is physically impossible to transfer trains onto the Waterloo and City line at Bank. What about the other end of the line at Waterloo Station? It's a similar problem. None of the other lines connect. The Waterloo and City line is completely cut off from both the overground and underground networks, so the movers must use a different strategy.
There is only actually one way to get anything larger than a rucksack into the Waterloo and City line depot, and that's through this hole here. If you look over the side of the hole, you'll see it's actually 15 metres into the depot, and we've got to land the trains on the rails, which are only 7 centimetres wide. There's only one piece of machinery we could use in a situation like this, and that's a crane.
But dangling a train into such a narrow opening will be like threading a needle at arm's length. The margin of error is tiny. If they scrape or damage any cars, they will have to go back to Doncaster for repair and delay the reopening of the line. John must come up with a precise plan which sites the crane as close as possible to the entrance shaft without causing damage to the surroundings. The obvious place is the road right next to the hull, but putting the crane here might lose John a few friends. This road is actually a bridge over the Waterloo and City Line train depot, and it's only strong enough to carry a few cars, not hundreds of tons of crane. So if the driver placed the crane here, he would soon find himself crashing through into the depot below. Not a good start to the day. So John Chenery must find an alternative location that can support hundreds of tons.
The nearest area that's strong enough to sit the crane on is down by the zebra crossing in front of us.
The only snag is that this is 36 meters from the hull, a long way away to dangle a 23-ton train. They will need a crane with a long reach, and a big crane means a big weight. But this move is happening right in the middle of London. With so many shops and houses in the area, there are some hidden hazards that John must avoid.
The whole area is crisscrossed by water mains, gas pipes, electricity cables, sewers. I need to be extremely precise as to the exact position that I set the crane up.
Having sorted out how to get the trains into the tunnel, all they have to do now is bring the trains down from Doncaster. With no direct rail links, they will have to move the trains along Britain's notoriously crowded motorways. Alf Arnold knows that he must thread the line of 20 cars into the tunnel in exactly the right order, because half have engines and half don't. If he gets it wrong, the line won't run. To help him, each car has a 5-digit code. It must have made sense once upon a time.
What's the easy way of working out the numbers? Obviously, we're going to make sure we get the right one in the right place.
Yeah.
The numbers must mean something.
Well, first of all, 65 is the motor car number. 03s is the unit number. But also, if you take this 65 and go down to the next carriage, it's 67, which is the one that runs, it's its stablemate. And they must always stay together. 3 and 4s go together, then 5s and 6, right the way up to 10, because we've got 10 units. It's clear as mud, OK?
Far away from urban bustle, deep in the Canadian hinterland, lies an isolated lake. Charon Lake is 220 miles northeast of Winnipeg and 50 miles from the nearest settlement. It is an unlikely setting for a nail-biting move, yet this remote lake holds a long-lost secret. On December the 10th, 1931, a lone Fokker Standard Universal transport plane was battling against a thick snowstorm. Spotting a frozen lake from his open cockpit, the pilot decided to risk landing. The plane was ferrying heavy equipment to a gold rush, so when it taxied to a halt, it broke through a thin area of ice. The crew escaped, but rescuing the plane in the middle of winter was impossible. With the coming of spring, the ice broke and the plane disappeared into the lake. "75 years on, Pat Madden, a retired Mountie, has come to this remote part of Canada to try to recover this historic aircraft.
You know, it's just an amazing saga of Canadian exploration and of aviation history. There were only 44 of them made, and they pretty much opened up a good part of the North for exploration and for mapping and everything. They were a real hardy bush plane, and this is the last one.
Pat has assembled a team of friends and keen amateurs to help him realize his dream, including his wife, Annette Spaulding, who shares his obsession for this aircraft. They've been coming every summer for 7 years in a row. They even spent their honeymoon searching for the Fokker.
We have everything planned. We have all the equipment to do it. All we need is Mother Nature on our side, and that's what we're really hoping for. We are not leaving this lake without that plane.
It's been an arduous task. This lake is huge, with 35 million square meters of muddy bottom to explore. Using sonar, they scoured almost the entire lake. Finally, in the summer of 2005, they had a lucky break.
And I'll stop the record right here. And there's our target. In the process of running some lines back and forth, we were able to get much better pictures of the target. And here we have one screen capture, which certainly looks like spars of the wing, the tail structure. You can actually see the steel lattice of the fuselage.
Intrigued by its eerie aura on the sonar, they now call the plane the Ghost of Charon Lake. The team has just 1 week to complete the mission before the volunteers fly back to their day jobs. If they're successful, the Canadian Air Force chopper will fly in to take the aircraft to an air museum in Winnipeg for restoration. Charon Lake is very remote. There are no roads for miles. The only way in is by float plane, and this makes diving operations risky. There's no medical help and only air evacuation, so they've taken the decision that it's too dangerous to dive. They will carry out the underwater salvage by remote control. They must rely on a pair of aquatic robots known as remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs.
Can we do it? Okay, let's lateral. 2 meters.
There are several ways they could raise the plane. The first is to use the ROVs to find the best places to cut the fragile airframe into sections and then winch them to the surface. But to make restoration easier, Pat would prefer to keep the airframe in one piece. A second option is to attach inflatable lifting bags and float the airframe to the surface. But as it's difficult to control the rate the lift bags rise towards the surface, there is a high risk that the plane will fall apart. Instead, they decide to make use of an original feature of the plane. There are 4 lift points just above the wing, designed for lifting the aircraft when swapping summer floats for winter skis. By attaching a line to each of these, the team hope to winch the plane safely to the surface. But they've based this rescue plan on blurry sonar images. They don't know the true state of the wings, the position of the engine, or the condition of the 4 lift points. The only way to check is to carry out a full reconnaissance of the plane's remains using cameras on their ROVs.
Well, we're seeing part of the frame, and there's some of the original fabric is still on the plane, which is quite interesting. And we're just looking now to find the engine mounts, see if the engine is actually still attached to the airframe.
This is the engine mount here, I think. That's looking pretty good as a potential engine.
Yeah, that's the engine, but it's down.
Yeah.
It's off.
Yeah. Thank God we found it, though. Holy shit.
Thousands of miles away, night draws in over London. John Chenery braces himself for the arrival of the giant crane that will lower the cars into the Waterloo and City Line tunnel.
The crane is going to block the road, and I've got to get these wagons out before the crane blocks the road and they'll be trapped in.
Block the road off, stop the traffic coming down so the crane can come in and do his job.
In less than 2 hours, John must throw a cordon around this busy street and transform it into a safe worksite. Not what everyone wants on a Friday night.
I've got to block the area where outside the bar.
Get us to the pub!
Bang on schedule, the lumbering giant arrives.
Trying to position the crane now, so just bringing it in.
Even though they've worked out the best position for the crane, there's still plenty that can go wrong once they start the move.
All the planning to this has happened in previous months, and this now is just the final bit, trying to get it together.
In this position, the crane's arm must be extended to reach the tunnel 36 meters away. This greatly increases the risk of toppling. A crane needs perfect balance, with everything pivoting around a point at the base of the arm, the fulcrum. When a car is lifted, its weight generates a force known as a torque. This torque has to be balanced by a torque coming from the other side of the fulcrum. If these forces are not equal, $5 million worth of crane and train will come crashing down. To get the balance right, they must add massive blocks of ballast to the back of the crane. But it's not just weight that generates torque, it's also distance. The load is much further away from the fulcrum than the ballast, and this greatly increases the torque exerted by the car. So they must add an incredible 165 tons of ballast to counteract just 23 tons of car. But adding all this extra weight creates another problem. The combined weight of the extra ballast, the train and the crane is over 300 tons. This much weight is too much for the tires to bear. So the crane is fitted with 4 special outriggers that extend out of the sides of the crane. Powered by hydraulics, these sturdy struts lift the tires clear of the ground. But this transmits all the weight onto 4 small areas. The pressure is going to be enormous, far too much for the street to support. All those fragile underground pipes will be at risk. So the movers need to spread the load over a larger area and decrease the pressure to a bearable level. The solution is to slide in a series of massive steel pads, all resting on a thin layer of foam.
This is the standard mats with the crane, which are 3 meters by 2.5. That reduces the loads, the actual bearing pressures to the ground. So the load going through these mats will actually be less ton per square metre than what it would for a lady, the average size lady, walking down the road in her high heel shoes with the heel going through the ground, when you've probably got approximately 100 and odd ton going through the outrigger and spread over these mats.
Once the crane is fully balanced and locked in position, they can start extending the boom.
Oh yeah, it's stressing me out.
This lifting Leviathan is now almost ready for action. But with only 18 hours to lift all 20 cars, the team know the night of the flying trains could become a nightmare. Meanwhile, the team in Manitoba is planning how to rescue a plane that's been stuck at the bottom of a lake for 75 years. They're reviewing reconnaissance footage taken by their remote vehicles 127 feet below the surface.
Those are your main spars, but there's ribbing. So there's intact ribbing.
Yep.
We have intact ribbing. We have wings.
Yes, so the integrity of the wing root
looks pretty good.
The pilot's windshield.
That's it. That is. Look at because there's a bracket there. There's the bracket. That's the
We
cockpit.
have the whole windshield?
That's the
It's
cowling.
not broken?
That's the cowling.
Oh my God.
That's awesome.
That's the engine.
That's
Is that the engine?
There's the
We
engine.
didn't have last year.
There's a cylinder head. Yeah, see those?
Oh, that's
right
those are
there.
cylinder heads right there.
I was so afraid we lost the engine. That's great.
The team are surprised by how much of the plane has survived. Although the outer canvas has rotted away, the metal framework remains intact. The only concern is that the engine has broken off the fuselage.
We're very excited to see that the engine's there, but our whole plan to bring it up is all based on the engine, and now we have to change and modify a lot of things.
It depends on if you're an optimist or a pessimist.
The team will have to rethink the lift plan. Because the 650-pound engine is detached from the airframe, the rear of the aircraft is now heavier than the front. So if they try to winch the plane using its lifting points, the tail would smash down into the lake bed. To avoid this, an ROV will attach an additional line to the rear of the airframe. This will prevent the tail section from dropping down. The team lower the small ROV to check where they will attach the lift cables. This aquatic robot is piloted by James Snellgrove. But in his quest for the perfect close-up, James pushes too far, too fast. Then, the unthinkable happens. The video feed from 127 feet below the surface suddenly cuts out, and James is left blind.
Oh, shit!
The situation rapidly deteriorates. Back at camp, Annette and Pat receive the radio message they've both been dreading.
What has happened, we're not totally sure, but it somehow got knotted itself around the airframe, and the attempts have made it tighter, and they're trying to get that off over.
Okay, we're on standby. Please let us know immediately when it's detangled. What has happened is the ROV, remote operated vehicle, is on a long, long cord that goes down. So at about 127 feet, the debris has made zero visibility, and by mistake, the ROV drove into the inside of the plane or around.
Scott, 10, come in, over.
Go ahead, Bill, over.
They're seeing oil slicks on the water now.
Oh God, I'm just really worried about this. This is a very expensive instrument.
When you're dealing with these kinds of operations, you're going to run into snags. You deal with them and you get them cleared and move on. So that's what we'll do. We find the snag, and it might be just on one cross, one piece of tubing. It's not going to hurt it to snip one piece of tubing that much. I'd certainly like to do it without having to do that, and I'm hoping the second ROV will be able to pull them free.
Pat heads out to assess the situation and offer help. Not only could they lose a machine worth nearly $100,000, but also their dream of salvaging the plane could be over. In England, it's move day. The trains are speeding down the M1 back to London to begin their descent underground. Soon, the streets behind Waterloo Station are bursting with cars and trains.
Not many times you get an opportunity to see them actually out of the ground.
Fantastic, isn't it?
Oh,
quite shocked, actually.
It also gives Alf a chance to check the trains and see if he can explain the all-important numbering system to his staff.
Let's do the second train first, yeah? That one's next, shunting back up. There's number 6, and I believe that's the 7th unit up there, which is 10s. So the first one down will be 6-5, then 6-5, then 6-7, and then 7s, 9s, 8, 7s. Let's try again, get it right. 6-5, 705, 6-7, 705, 6-8, 6-5, 08, and 6-7. And that's the final one. That's car number 12.
This is actually going to turn into a comedy of errors. You can see it, can't you?
As long as we check with Alf and make sure that things are right, you can't afford to make any mistakes. So it's better sometimes to check them over twice, even 3 times.
Would you like it again?
Undeterred by the apparent confusion, Alf decides it's time to lift the first train. But there is one last issue they need to overcome. With the crane now set in position, the operation should be straightforward. Ideally, the crane driver would like to swing the cars in a smooth arc, straight to the shaft. But there's a problem. 25 meters from the crane and right in the middle of a smooth swing, there's a 3-story building. Using this trajectory would not be the best way to impress the neighbors. So the crane driver must perform a complicated multi-stage maneuver guaranteed to increase the stress on both man and machine. He will lift and swing in 2 distinct stages. First, he will slew the car in a shallow arc to avoid the cafe, and then lower the arm for the final approach to the hole. Hardly a hole-in-one, but certainly par for this obstacle course. Keeping a wary eye on the cafe, the driver begins the first lift.
There it is, it's clear now.
It's the world's first flying train.
Amazing, yeah.
She's now coming in between the gap between the building and the lamppost. £1 million is just floating in space. We're bringing it into a very small aperture, which has only got half a metre either side. Quite stressful as I'm looking at it. The next key part is actually engaging the wheels with the track. We have a banksman down there who's actually organising all this.
Keep going. Keep coming. Look at go, Jerry, keep going. Keep going. Keep coming. Stop, all stop.
All stop, we're down. It's down on the tracks, perfect. Absolutely spot on. Fantastic job he's just done.
1 down, 19 to go. Over the next few hours, the sky is buzzing with flying trains. But the efforts to raise another flying machine in Manitoba are not running quite so smoothly. They face a difficult problem. $100,000 worth of ROV is wrapped around the spars of the Fokker float plane they're trying to lift.
We were planning to look at the left side jacking point, and the bite tightened up. We got fouled. It happens.
With the light fading and rough weather forecasted, they need to mount a rescue mission fast or risk losing both the ROV and the aircraft. Waiting at base camp, Annette hopes for the best, but the stress is beginning to show.
This plane, it really does mean a lot to me. And we're trying to do all this in a very short time frame, probably 4 days. We have everything else in place, everything.
On the floating pontoon, Mark steers the second ROV towards the plane. Following the umbilical of the trapped ROV down to the aircraft, his camera soon reveals what has happened. In the low visibility, James, the pilot of the other ROV, has managed to tie his umbilical in a knot around the fuselage. Mark will have to work out exactly how the knot was tied. Then James can work backwards to untie himself. This is a slow, nerve-wracking process, especially for those back at base camp waiting for news.
I don't like to see anybody lose their equipment. That's an expensive piece of equipment, and you don't like to see anybody lose anything like that at the bottom of the lake. Now, let's just hope for the best.
Back on the barge, and Pat thinks he's found a way to free the trapped ROV. The little ROV is ensnared by just one thin piece of the airframe. The second ROV can rip it out of the way. It will damage the plane, but the team have no other choice. Annette is feeling the tension and looks for any positive sign.
Remember the rainbow where we found it? The rainbow came out when we found it? And the rainbow's out right. I hope it's the same meaningful thing.
Roger, we saw the rainbow. It's a double rainbow. It's right over top of us, and the vehicles are free.
Everybody up, everybody up, everybody out.
The vehicles are free! Ow!
We got them up. One's on the surface, the second one we're just getting across right now.
You guys are unbelievably awesome. Over.
With the small ROV free, James the pilot can breathe a huge sigh of relief.
The vehicle was 100% functional before we surfaced it. No signs of real damage to it. So we'll get it cleaned up. We'll check the umbilical out, make sure everything's all right, and call it a day.
Not only is the ROV free, but the team is about to receive an unexpected bonus. The first pieces of the plane to feel the air in 75 years have been liberated. They were tangled in the lines powering the little ROV.
Look at that.
They have pulled up one of the plane's landing lights, and its condition is incredible. Even the light bulb has survived after 3/4 of a century. Spirits are high, but the ghost of Charon Lake has some more surprises in store. Back in London, and after 8 hours of lifting, they've loaded 8 of the 20 trains into the tunnel. So far, they haven't damaged any in their incredibly tight descent through the entrance shaft. But the bad weather on the horizon threatens the whole operation.
Joe, could you just give us a reading on the wind speed, please?
Fluctuating today, anything between 2 and
11 meters per second.
Thank you, mate.
I'm actually taking the wind speed, and at the moment, just standing here in Spur Road, it's nearly 6 miles an hour. But it's not here that's a problem. It's actually up there, because there's a lot more wind up there than down here.
Alf has good reason to be concerned. All the roads converge at the point where the crane sits. Although they won't be channeling any traffic, they will be channeling the wind. The car has 2 long, flat sides which will act like a sail. Any gusts will make the train more and more difficult to control. As the wind speed increases, the car will start to swing. If the wind catches the car as it enters the narrow shaft, it could smash into the concrete walls, or even worse, it could become jammed in the entrance. With so many cars needed to be lifted in such a short time frame, this could derail the whole operation. But Alf's team have a secret weapon to combat any sudden gusts. A guiding device known as a pogo stick, which they attach to the front and rear of each carriage.
Go on, buddy. Thanks, Doug.
As long as wind speeds don't exceed 22 miles per hour, these bars will stop the cars crashing into the sides.
There's 2 channels over in the hole over there, and these wheels run up and down on there. They caster up and down. So as the vehicle moves from side to side, swaying, this takes out the sway and just drops it down.
Keep going down like that. Keep coming, Jerry. Keep it coming.
Oh, look at this, we're gusting now. Goodness me, as we just lifted, it's now up to 10 miles an hour.
Keep coming as you are. Keep coming down. Keep coming down. Keep coming, Jerry.
This is a very bad gust coming now, 6.2. This may stop lifting at the moment. Look at this.
Keep coming, Jerry. Keep it coming. Keep coming as you are.
Despite the blustery conditions, the pogo sticks keep the move right on track.
Keep coming, mate.
Having rescued the trapped ROV, the team in Manitoba is preparing to go ahead with the lift, but they've just seen some rather disturbing video footage. During the rescue mission, the onboard camera on Mark's ROV discovered that the lift points, vital for lifting the plane, are either corroded or missing.
It's just corroded. That's the starboard aft lift lug. Yeah.
So Mark, you think that the angle, you wouldn't be able to get it through there?
I can't do it. Oh, bring it down.
Without these lift points, the team need to find alternative places strong enough to support raising the plane. They soon identify an obvious target.
So looking at it from this angle right here, you're talking about this right here.
Yeah.
Connecting right here.
Yeah.
They think the landing strut attached to the ski may be strong enough.
Yeah. That's the heavy axle.
Do we have that heavy axle free of silt down to that point?
We have. The silt is up to there.
So this is out of the silt. This part is out of the silt.
This part is. But the problem is you got to tie it around. I don't see a rove solution for hooking onto that.
That's a diver job. Diver can do it in zero viz, and ROV can. Yeah. Not with any effectiveness, because you don't know where you're dredging. It's just bam, bam, bam.
It's bam, bam, bam changes.
Divers are now their only hope of rescuing the plane. Pat puts in a call for volunteers willing to risk diving in such an isolated location. 2 days later, the cavalry arrives. They're a crack team of divers from the Canadian Amphibious Search Team, a group of volunteers more used to pulling dead bodies from lakes than rescuing sunk aircraft. There are only 2 days before the helicopter comes to pick up what they've retrieved, so the divers get straight to work. They have 2 objectives: confirm the engine is completely detached and check the airframe is strong enough to withstand a lift.
Let's go do it.
Even though they are all experienced divers, used to working in low visibility, this is a serious undertaking. At a depth of over 120 feet, they can only afford 20 minutes on the wreck. Any longer, and they're risking the bends. As the nearest decompression chamber is 220 miles away, misjudging their dive time could be fatal.
You know, I'm just reaching out to touch something right there. Now that's really solid stuff right there. Nothing moves around when I shake on it.
Topside blue diver. Gather up red diver and prepare to travel.
Okay, blue diver, red diver, surface.
Right on schedule, the divers return to the surface with some encouraging news.
Diver on the surface. Red diver on the surface, thumbs up.
If I'm standing, so the airplane goes that way and the wings are, that's front, motor's now down here. These corners, right here where there's a whole bunch of things come together, I could give that a pretty good shake.
Did you get your hand down?
I can get my hand down and touch the actual ski.
Okay, how much mud is, how much
You know,
silt?
there's not a lot of stuff laying on top of the skis.
The divers are confident they can retrieve the engine and immediately return to the bottom to to attach a nylon strap and lift bands. Pat starts to crank the heavy engine off the bottom. But will the flimsy-looking boom be able to cope with all this weight? The signs are not good. The only option is to attach more lift bands.
And we're standing by to dive.
Despite the boom's groans and protests, the team finally get the engine to within a few inches of the surface.
Well, this is the big step one.
They are running out of light as they tow the engine to a nearby island in the hope they can winch it ashore. By the time they erect the boom, it's dark.
Okay, up another 10, going up.
The boom is designed to lift in excess of 1,000 pounds, yet it's clearly struggling to cope with the 650-pound engine. Even with the help of the support boat's crane, they still cannot lift it out of the water. In the end, it's down to good old-fashioned brawn to finally haul the Fokker engine ashore.
Well, there was some serious concern, but hey, it worked. It all worked.
Hamilton propellers. That's the company, eh?
Oh my God.
What do you want to find next?
Early the next morning, there is a chance to admire the engine. But with the helicopters due in just 6 hours, Pat has to make a tough decision about the rest of the plane.
We've got the engine, and we've decided not to bring the fuselage up at this time. The bottom line is we'd be rushing it, and I'm not prepared to jeopardize this aircraft for the sake of getting it up in a short order of time.
After so much effort, it's hard to leave the plane behind. But only the engine will be leaving on this airlift back to Winnipeg.
This is incredible. This is awesome. There he is. He's on. Up and away. "75 years, it's back in the air."
In London, the team attempting to return all 20 cars to a subway line are right on track. But as fatigue sets in, they make an inevitable mistake. Someone misreads the 5-digit number on the side of a train.
Oh, for God's sake. You've lowered the wrong one.
He says it's the wrong carriage. I've got to take that one out. This one's got to go first.
Just operational issues down in the tunnel.
Someone's getting tired upstairs, hadn't spotted it, and then one of us has just looked at you and said, it's the wrong one.
Mixing up the numbers, the team have inserted a driver car instead of an ordinary car. They are left with only 3/4 of a train. If the depot had more space, they could shunt the cars around and deposit the rogue car on the adjacent track. Once the correct car is lowered in, they could then join the other cars to form a complete train. But this is the penultimate car, and the depot is so full, there is no room to maneuver the cars around. With the deadline looming, their only option is to lift the wrong train back out and insert the correct car.
Just blame me, everybody else does. Blame me for everything. I painted the numbers wrong on the train. I backed it in the wrong way round. Blame me, everyone blame me.
With their sense of humor intact, the crew go into overtime and overdrive to swap the rogue car with the right one.
"1:20 in the morning, every car's in. That's it. Everybody's now saying, had enough, we're going to go home."
I'm relieved. No damage, no accidents, no real problems.
All that remains to be done is to seal up the hole, and the Waterloo and City line is once more ready for passengers. To coin an English phrase, the job's a good 'un. 3 months after leaving the ghost of Charon Lake, the volunteer salvage team are back. It's October, and they've managed to get some more time off work to make a final attempt to raise the plane before winter sets in. After the previous failure using ROVs, they've decided to dispense with the robots and rely solely on divers. Pat and Annette have persuaded them to risk the lake's dark waters once more. They are assembling an improvised rescue sling to place under the plane's crumbling carcass. Fearing that the rear part of the plane is too fragile to survive a conventional lift, the divers will descend to the wreck and cut the plane in half just behind the wing. After encasing the fragile tail section in a cradle made of snow fence, they will then winch this section to the surface, leaving the remaining fuselage to be lifted later. Once again, they don't have much time. The helicopter is only available for the airlift on one day, and the weather is looking distinctly unsettled. With their snow fence cradle at the ready, the divers drop straight down to the wrecked plane.
Okay, there comes the aircraft in sight now, and we are right on the tail section.
But working in Charon Lake, even the slightest disturbance of the lake bottom plunges the divers into a world of confusion. They can't even see their own hands, let alone the plane. They will have to slice and dice by touch. But despite these awkward conditions, the divers manage to encase the tail in the cradle.
I have no idea what's going to happen.
Pop up a bit. We want you to watch it. We're going to winch this.
Once the cradle is in place, they begin to winch the tail section away from the bottom.
Okay, I think it's free.
Is that thing secure in there, or do we have to do something?
I don't think we want to let this thing hang out here for the night.
The tail section has slipped out of the cradle, and their hopes of salvaging the Fokker are literally hanging by a thread.
This big piece hanging down below could absolutely break off and make its way back to the bottom pretty quick.
It's almost too much for Pat and Annette to bear. Perhaps a hastily improvised sling can save the day. With this extra support connected to the plane's tail, the team now feel confident to tow it to shallow water, ready for the final lift just before the helicopter arrives. A quick dive under to check the tail's condition, and Annette's reaction signals that everything is A-OK. They want to press on, but with the sun setting, they have no choice but to wait until the next day. Next morning, they have a rude awakening. Winter has arrived suddenly. The wind is whipping up 3-foot waves across the lake, and the outlook is not encouraging.
It's going to drop to about -4 degrees tonight. So that little skiff of frost you had this morning will be nothing compared to what you have tomorrow. We have to get everybody out because you cannot fly when the snow is coming and the winds are blowing. It's not safe to be here.
Facing evacuation, Pat and Annette take one last desperate look for any improvement in the weather. They're not in luck.
Oh, the barge is really bouncing around quite severely, and you wouldn't be able to even stand on it. Waves are crashing up over the bow of it, and all sides, actually. There's no way anybody could work on there. It's just too rough.
I mean, with that kind of rocking and rolling, we would jeopardize the integrity of the structure to bring it up. I'm so disappointed.
With their new plan clearly working, they have been beaten by the weather. Pat and Annette have to once more concede defeat in their battle to move this historic plane. But they will be back. They will never abandon the ghost of Charon Lake. 30 luxury homes are embarking on a 150-mile sea voyage to form a unique floating town. But will all the homes survive swirling currents and a precarious lift and launch? The world's first full-size house factory is about to start production.
I was worried about that.
But can movers keep up with the assembly line and haul over 200 homes to build the fastest town in the West?
That's all the power I got right there.
Two towns, two teams with a mission to move them. Two titanic tasks that will test the nerves of the people who dare to risk huge moves. Moving buildings is a risky business. So imagine the challenge and danger of moving an entire town. One of the most ambitious moves in history began in 1954, when residents of remote areas in Newfoundland attempted to relocate their communities to busier shores. Some tried to haul their homes across the frozen winter sea, while others waited until summer and risked floating their homes on fragile wooden rafts. Not everyone made it across. "50 years later, another ambitious Canadian is preparing to move a town by sea, this time through the treacherous waters of Vancouver Island. Visionary developer Mark Lindholm has grand plans for a marina in the historic town of Victoria.
This is a layout, a plan of what the docks will eventually look like.
Mark's idea is to build homes that float on water, moored in streets alongside a series of walkways. The 30 homes will form a futuristic floating community. Mark's first challenge is to find adventurous home buyers willing to take the plunge and sign up to the life aquatic.
So you look like a very young couple. Do you still have children at home?
Empty nesters.
His first customers are Ken and Deanna Stratford.
As a float home owner, you're not only joining that yacht club kind of sentiment, but you're also now one of the mavericks that own a float home. Everything is possible. We can put elevators in, we can do anything, pretty much anything that you do on land, we can do on the water. It's just, as I say, it's a function of your checkbook. It can all be done.
Well, I think maybe we should talk to that architect.
I'd like that.
Ken and Deanna hope to move into their marina mansion in just 6 months' time.
We're hoping that a float home would give us a lot of freedom. It certainly has everything that we would be looking for as far as lifestyle goes. You've always got the light around you. You're always energized and interested in what's happening and what's going on.
But already Mark faces a problem. Marina residents are not keen on a noisy construction site in their picturesque harbor. So Mark must build the floating homes 150 miles to the north of the island at marine construction company SeaTech. Once complete, he'll have to move each of the 30 homes back to Victoria to create his floating town. The construction team, led by Fabian Stratton, have no time to lose.
I'll just start decking for 25 feet. Okay, let's get 4 boards down.
But how exactly will they make these buildings float? The easiest method would be to build a hollow container under the house, just like the hull of a boat. The problem is that, just like a boat, if it's holed, it will fill up with water and sink. In order to create an unsinkable home, the floating foundation needs to be filled with something solid but light.
Be
huge foam blocks, put them inside the float for the houses, cover them in rebar and concrete. They'll end up getting, I don't know, a floatable product.
They fill the foundations with 18 blocks of styrofoam. They've estimated that 200 cubic meters of foam should be enough to keep the front door floating above water, but they won't know for sure until the home is launched.
We're just doing some finishing touches on getting the foam sealed up. Any cracks like that we'll need to fill with monofoam.
They encase the foam foundations in water-resistant concrete, leave it to set solid, and build the luxury house on top. Building the first set of homes takes 4 months. Their next challenge is to launch the homes into the water and find out for sure if they sink or swim. In Denver, Colorado, a more earthly paradise is about to materialize. Construction king David Cohen made his name working alongside his father, building some of Denver's tallest skyscrapers. Now he's planning a mass home move that could rapidly accelerate suburban growth. This man thinks big.
I would imagine in the central business district that our company built 15 or 20 buildings. From the Amoco building to my left, Petro Lewis Tower in front of us, and the 54-story building, the Quest Tower. That's the most significant building in downtown Denver we built.
Having successfully conquered vertical building, David is now turning his attention to the horizontal. Amazingly, it's today's housing developments, stretching for miles over vast areas of land, that are the new giants of construction. So big that if you were to pile up all the homes in a large new housing development, they would be taller than the Empire State Building. David plans to build a town of 237 homes on this piece of land. His ambition is to reduce the average time it takes to build a 4-bedroomed house from 100 days to just 25. He thinks that if you can build cars on a fast-moving production line, then you should be able to do the same with houses. So David plans to build the world's first factory for full-sized homes.
This parcel of land on the edge of town has been planned and approved for a large new residential community. If we put the factory right here, we can build full-size traditional homes in a controlled environment and get them to their foundation without the impediments that would normally make that impossible.
Conventional wisdom has always assumed that family homes are too big and fragile to be factory built and hauled hundreds of miles cross-country. But David plans to put an assembly line at the center of his new town, so no home will need to be moved more than a mile to reach its foundation. The factory will pump out a new house every week until the rows of empty streets are lined with homes. When the town is complete, the factory can be moved to a new site where once again, a new town can be born. The empty streets are waiting and the factory is ready. With millions of dollars invested in the project, the stakes are high for David. If this works, it could revolutionize house building forever. On Vancouver Island, the team building the floating homes destined for Victoria Marina face a major challenge. They must launch the first 3 houses into the water. They've built the homes on top of a giant floating platform. Now they must gently lower the platform into the water and allow the homes to float clear. But this won't be easy. Compressed air lines feed into 10 huge tanks that keep the platform floating above the waterline. When they release the air, the tanks flood with water and the platform supporting the houses sinks. The homes should then lift up and float free.
It's just like a ship sinking, basically. But we're trying to control it a bit.
One by one, Fabian releases air to flood the tanks under the platform.
So we work our way in a bit of a sequence so that we go down evenly. See, if we flooded these two tanks first, that end would drop down. So we want to do it as even as possible.
Well, you don't want to damage anything. You know, there's a lot of money sitting here and get things bouncing around, and you start banging buildings together and stuff like that. Well, then you spend a lot of money doing repairs.
The water is just about to the corner here on this one, Fabian.
It's the beginning. It could go bad yet.
It's dropping right now. It's going to start going here real quick, I think.
Try to dip this way a little bit.
Sink it big on that side, the way.
Suddenly, the entire platform lurches dangerously to one side. As Fabian battles to level the platform, the first house starts to float free. Houses 2 and 3 also lift off.
Oh, there we go. It's close now.
Everything's floating! Hey, John, we need you to make that quick, please.
They're losing control as the strong tide pulls the buildings away from the dock. Within seconds, the situation becomes critical. The tide is about to smash the house into a post.
Pull it that way, John! Towards Quadra! Gonna hit the pile!
Hey, you pulling Joe, or what are you doing over there? Gotta send somebody to rescue that other one because it's heading to Campbell River. Well, you can see the current picking up here.
The strong tidal current sweeps the first house downstream.
No, head south, John. You're going too far north.
Well, I'm working on it here.
John's little boat engine is no match for this strong tide. So he attaches a line to the runaway house and tows it with the tide to the safety of a moored barge.
We're on our way now.
They finally manage to bring the homes under control and move them clear of the platform. Tug driver Kev arrives to tow the homes to the marina in Victoria, but decides the tide is far too strong to risk setting off now.
So what time do you think you're going to get away?
Midnight is the next flood. Weather providing aids.
Yeah, always.
Kev waits for the tide to turn, and at midnight, he finally casts off. He faces an epic 150-mile journey through unpredictable waters.
Well, the last time they sent me out for 3 days, I was out 19. The other time they sent me out for 6, I was gone 44. That's part of the job.
By morning, the homes have traveled 50 miles down the coast, but a storm is now brewing.
By the looks of the weather, we're going to get stuck at Powell River. A couple of anchors there we can tie to. Sunday night it's meant to blow up to 40 southeast, so we definitely want to be hiding for that.
With bad weather ahead, Kev risks exposing the houses to high winds and waves if he's caught in open waters. He needs to get to the sheltered side of these islands. But to make it to safety, they must negotiate a maritime black spot, the infamous Dod Narrow.
It runs pretty good in there. The tide runs hard. It can run up to 6 or 7 knots.
Dod Narrows is one of the smallest and most dangerous straits off Vancouver Island. Only 60 foot wide and lined with rocky outcrops, it channels the tides into high-speed cross-currents that swirl in vicious eddies and whirlpools.
We got another boat coming to grab one of the houses. I'll be following the other boat. He's been doing it for 30 years. So.
There's a real risk of the two houses smashing into each other or grounding on the rocks. So Kev has called in veteran tug driver Harvey to take the first house and guide him through the Narrows.
In the last 30 years, I've been down here and retrieving 4 boats that have gone down, but it's been stupidity, really. One guy read the tide wrong and got caught in the back end. He thought he was flying up here, and all of a sudden, Joan Point, he hit the ebb tide and spun around and went under.
Kev watches anxiously as Harvey enters the Narrows first.
We're going around in circles here.
Yeah, no kidding. So now we're doing 5 knots, we're in the tide. This is a back eddy here. I see the path's wanting to go sideways that way. The tide's running faster up that side than it is in here. But I don't want to be too close to that side.
Go ahead,
Kev battles to hold a good line through the Narrow and out the other side.
Let's go. See you there, Ken.
Go ahead, Harvey.
Good job there. Good job.
I'm feeling better now.
You're all tightened up and away.
Thanks very much, Harvey. We're on our way.
They've made it halfway to Victoria, and after surviving the rite of passage through Dodd Narrow, the crew of the North Coaster enjoy a celebratory sausage.
Thank you, sir.
In Denver, the assembly line in David's pioneering house factory is gearing up to build one house every 25 days. There are 5 workstations, one for each stage of production. At Station 1, they assemble the walls, floors, and roof of the wood frame house.
We don't have this luxury on the field. You hump everything, you haul everything on your back. They're spoiled.
At Station 2 and 3, they install the internal plumbing and wiring. At Station 4, they paint the walls and put in the windows. And at the final station, they lay the floors, plumb in the bathrooms, and plug in the microwave. Only one piece of the house is missing, the foundations, which are waiting outside. But this is a major problem for the construction team. A wooden building of this size could easily twist out of shape if the team tried to move it through the factory without a solid base. The only solution is to build the house on a steel frame, a bit like the chassis of a car, to keep the structure rigid. Underneath the frame, they install 10 air casters. Each one channels a powerful jet of air capable of lifting up to 14 tons. The house floats on a thin, frictionless cushion of air along the assembly line from one station to the next.
It's more like a hover pad. These are little hover pads all the way around it. You can actually push a whole house with your hand. 110-pound guy moving 32 tons. Pretty amazing stuff.
As the first homes take shape inside the factory, the sales team do their best to promote the empty streets outside.
It's going to be a little challenging for the sales staff to try and get people to purchase houses without seeing them go up, and then they'll show up complete, like a finished manufactured product you'd buy at a store almost. So it's going to be a different selling experience for sure.
I'm David Cohen.
Hi, I'm George Rosales.
George, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Jessica.
Jessica, nice to meet you.
David meets the Rosales family.
Nice to meet you.
He hopes to convince them that his factory can build their dream home.
Wow.
It's huge.
I know, isn't it? That's something.
The Rosales family are the first buyers to be given the grand tour of the assembly line in action. Sales manager Jennifer Alpert hopes to secure the sale by showing them the layout of a 4-bedroomed home.
So we could be standing in our kitchen right now.
You could be standing in your kitchen right now. Planning what we're going to have for dinner.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Standing on the table.
So start building it.
Yeah. Oh, okay, good. We're ready.
The Rosales home takes shape, but before it can move down the production line, the team faced their biggest challenge: launching the first completed house into the outside world and proving that David's factory-built town might just work. In Vancouver, the floating homes are on the final leg of their voyage.
Welcome to Victoria. The home's getting home. Thank goodness.
Victoria Harbour is one of the busiest on the west coast of Canada. Cruise liners, ferries and yachts jostle for space as a constant flow of seaplanes adds to the mayhem.
25 Sierra Harbor, did you have contact with that beaver now? Crossing at 12 o'clock, 2.5 miles.
Here comes the plane now. This is a busy place.
Kev must now guide the homes through a narrow channel to reach the marina.
We got lots of water in there right now.
The reef I've been finding is 12 feet, so 12 and 14 feet.
It's not much water and it's very narrow.
Right here. I gotta go in this channel with it right here.
Kev takes the houses as far as he can, and then the marina team moor them into position.
Yeah, push it in, then we can untie it.
Speed kills.
Yeah, tell that kid, you know, don't go ramming, eh? He only knows one speed.
Marina manager Colin is anxious to see whether any seawater has washed in, causing damage.
That's a bit. I mean, considering it's come 130 nautical miles in rough seas, it's pretty good.
Mark's town is taking shape, but much too slowly. The move has taken twice as long as planned. He will never meet his completion deadline if he carries on moving homes at this pace. Customers like Ken and Deanna are packing up their city homes ready to move into the floating town. Mark and the team will have to come up with a faster way of shipping the houses.
It's always painful to leave a house or a home, but we also, of course, are really looking forward to the new adventure. So.
Back at SeaTech, they've been rethinking how to move the floating homes.
Well, the first two we did, they went down. We had a bit of problems with weather. They were delayed, and so this is why we're trying a different system.
Their new approach is to use this huge barge, first as a construction site to build the homes, then as a floating platform to move them. It's large enough to take 4 homes, including Ken and Deanna's.
This is a much safer method to transport the houses down because they're sitting inside of a barge, so there's really nothing can happen to them. You can go in any weather, and there's no chance of damage to the house. It actually goes quicker with the barge because the barge can tow at 7 or 8 knots.
They launch today. The team work frantically to finish the homes before the tugboat arrives to tow them to Victoria.
Still got to dismantle the scaffolding, wrap up the tools. We're still installing.
23 minutes.
See ya.
With the tug roped to the front of the barge, the floating village sets sail.
Everybody's off, I hope. Have a safe trip. She's all done. My babies! Yeah, they're gorgeous. Looks like its own little floating town, basically. Just take the sides of the barge off and grow some grass. You could have its own little community. The guys, they did a great job.
The hull of the barge moves easily in the water. The little North Coaster picks up good speed as they reach Dodd Narrow a day ahead of schedule.
Security, security, security. North Coaster, southbound, one barge in tow, transiting Dodd Narrows at 1-1.
They draw the barge in close to the tug to ensure maximum control as they navigate the Narrow. Once through, they let it out on a longer leash. By dawn the next day, the four houses reach Victoria. They've arrived on time and completely dry. But now they face a new challenge. This barge doesn't sink. So how do you offload 4 85-ton homes into the ocean? In Denver, it's time to test David's groundbreaking idea and move the first house out of the factory. The foundations for this first home lie half a mile away from the factory doors. With the assembly line set to churn out one house every week, there's no time to build a traditional moving rig for each home. So they've designed a unique whole house shuttle, complete with leveling hydraulics and remote-controlled power steering. The plan is to dock the shuttle at the end of the assembly line, roll the house on, and steer the rig to the foundations. No one has tried anything like this before, and Move Team leader Scott White is feeling the pressure.
Here's the real deal. This is it. This is the real house, the first house. So it's a make or break day for me.
The team hooks cables to the house and start to winch it out onto the shuttle and along steel beams.
Ready?
As his boss looks on, Scott checks the house rolls evenly. If it veers off course, it could fall off the rig.
It worked. I was worried about that.
This is a real milestone, having unit number 1 come out the door. We have worked on it for so many years. It's exciting.
We're rocking and rolling now.
The house makes it safely onto the moving rig. But now the real test begins. This is the first time any of the Move Team has ever attempted to move a house.
A little nervous, little anxious. It's been a long time coming for this day. And if something breaks, it's Adrian's fault. Our brakes are off, we're ready to go. I'll pop a wheelie right now.
Using the remote control, Scott rolls the rig forward and the house sets off at a snail's pace. Up ahead, he faces his first tight turn onto a busy road.
I am not going to clear this string. I see there's nothing I can do about it.
A newly planted tree stands in the way, but with the house blocking the busy road, Scott can't park here. Just after the house picks up speed, they hit another glitch.
Yeah, we're gonna have to go real slow over this curb, and you guys gotta keep me level.
Unfortunately for Scott, sidewalks have been built before the houses are in place.
That's both joysticks full. That's all the power I got right there. That's just not enough. Full throttle!
Scott has one more shot, but they're still stuck.
That's it. The truth, I'm at a loss, man.
With the house stuck in the dirt, there's only one thing for it. To call in the house mover's trusty friend, the front loader. With an extra 100 horsepower hooked up, the house makes it over the curb.
A little more. That's good.
Scott checks everything inside the house has survived the bumpy ride.
The house is in good condition, although we're not all the way there yet. We got another 30 feet. All right, let's do it, boss.
Their final task is to slide the house onto its foundations.
This way? 3/8 that way? Yeah.
This house will stand in the center of a row of 6 adjoining townhouses.
Now we're dead nuts, parallel with the foundation. It's like a set of railroad tracks. You have to keep it all straight.
The team must line up the walls precisely with the foundations. If they're a fraction of an inch out, the entire street of homes will not be straight.
All right, we're going, John.
They reconnect the winches and carefully roll house number 1 onto its foundations.
Beautiful. Oh, Harley, we couldn't ask for more than that.
With 236 more homes to haul, Scott's team must ensure the next move runs smoother to keep pace with the assembly line.
You know, this is the first real test of it, but that's things I need to think through better in the future. Is you know, trees, posts, stuff like that. It's so intricate and so complex, and you know, one part of a million things could go wrong and it shuts us down. Just a little tune-up, you know, a little maintenance. We'll get it.
In Victoria, the team faces the daunting task of unloading 4 floating homes into the water. This shipyard has the only machine on the island big enough for the job.
It's a 150 metric ton, level luffing, electrically powered, fully revolving, rail mounted crane. And we are going to be using the 150 ton level luffing crane to put these houseboats from the barge into the water.
The rigging team prepare the lifting gear as crane operator Gary lowers the 5-ton hook.
Yeah, the horn works. Try the wipers, they're quieter. Hey, Gary, take her up.
These are some of the strongest lifting cables in the business. But crane rigger Norm has spotted a major problem.
We could probably block them all, but there's 2 here that are going to be critical. The 3rd one is probably the worst. Look at back. We've got a little bit of a scenario. We got an overhang on the top of the houseboats, which will be a potential crush hazard.
There's nowhere on the floating homes for the crane to hook onto. So the team plan to pass lifting straps under the foundations and attach them to the crane with long steel wires. But the balconies could be crushed by the cables as they tension up.
Something we got to deal with.
To To solve the problem, the crane crew hope these huge red beams, known as spreader bars, will hold the steel wires away from the fragile balconies. With the bars in place, they thread the lifting straps under the house through long, narrow trenches. Each nylon belt is capable of lifting over 70 tons. The team is nervous. They have never attempted a lift of this scale and complexity before.
All stop.
What they don't want to do is pick the house up and have it swing one way or another. A couple inches either way could be catastrophic.
Ken and Deanna watch anxiously from the dockside with the other float home owners.
Well, first of all, it's somebody's home. This is their whole life savings they put into some of these homes. And so it's a little bit of a tight space. Last thing we want is a homeowner getting all upset because there was a scratch, right? And who would blame them?
The lift is certainly going to be exciting, and I'd rather they were cautious now than after one's tumbled into the water, so.
Okay, Gary, I'll get you to come up easy, please.
Coming up easy. Yeah, we're just starting to take weight now.
You hold that.
I'll stop. Coming up real easy, Norm, to 50 ton.
Start now, Norm.
Coming up on the load real easy to 80 metric ton. I'll stop at 80.
Yeah, you're starting to peel off on this end too, Norm, and the barge is falling about too. It's moving around with the hook.
Yeah, I think we are stuck to the barge.
You've got two things that are moving. You got a crane that's going up and the barge is going with it. And it's moving.
The team faces a sticky situation. The concrete foundations that were poured directly onto the barge are now clinging to the barge's surface. As Gary lifts more weight, he's lifting the entire barge out of the water. The home could break free from the barge at any moment. Then there's a danger the barge will shift. If Gary doesn't keep up with the moving target, the swinging house could easily crash into the other homes.
Okay, Gary, up 2 more, please.
Dale going up 2 more.
Still on her.
So what we're going to do is go up in little increments, and hopefully we can just slowly break it free of the deck. Going up real easy to 87.
There she goes.
We're free.
So everything's good. Gary, we got a movement here of the barge. You're going to have to keep up with it, buddy.
The barge moves suddenly, and the house swings alarmingly close to Ken and Deanna's home.
Get away from my house, too. You're getting a little close, swinging back and forth.
Gary rolls the crane to one side and lifts the house clear of the danger.
And weight's coming off. We're down to 55 ton.
Where's our champagne?
Yahoo!
Yay! Congratulations.
To the owner's relief, the first house is safely in the water, and Norm climbs aboard to release the lifting gear.
Think skinny, Norm. Think skinny.
I am skinny. It's all the gear I got on. That's what it is.
Now that they've done the first one, the next 3, well, hey, they've broken ground.
Well, went down free to go. That was a hard one. First one's always a hard one. Yep, it's always the hard one. The next ones go off pretty quick.
They connect up house number 2 and start to lift, but immediately run into more trouble.
Okay, up easy, Gary.
Crushing the roof on this side.
Okay, I'm going to get definite compression on this when it starts coming out.
The balconies and overhangs on this house are extra wide.
We keep coming up against the house with our wires. It'll crush it if we keep coming up. I don't know what we're going to do here. Some more head scratching. That's why I don't have any hair. Too much scratching.
The team must improvise and solve the problem quickly. They hammer in thick wooden blocks to hold the straps further away from the house. Gary restarts the lift. The team watches nervously, hoping that the blocks will hold.
We're coming up. We've got a little bit of bend on the end here, but it's not too bad yet. Bail up real easy.
Oh, there she goes.
It works. The second house sails over the edge of the barge and into the water. The towboats clear the landing zone, and the third house touches down in style. Last up is Ken and Deanna's place.
Hey, hey. Hey, there she goes.
It's kind of scary watching your future hanging by a couple of nylon straps.
Sounds like the story of my marriage.
Does it float?
3, 2, 1. Contact.
She's down.
She's down all the way. And they just have to save the best to last.
In Denver, the house factory is in full swing. Completed houses now roll off the assembly line at a rate of 1 per week. In just 3 months, the move team has hauled the first street of homes into place. Now just one house is missing from East Chenango Place, the Rosales family home. They make the finishing touches ready for the big move, but overnight, disaster strikes.
We don't normally get snows of this magnitude here in Denver. It's been 4 or 5 years since we've had a storm of this size. We've got 2 feet of snow in the clear, drifts of 4 and 5 feet. This was a big snow event.
The snow stalls Scott's plans to move the house out of the factory this morning, but it can't sit there for long.
The storm hasn't really impacted our work within the plant. We're able to work in our environment that's controlled. The rest of the city's shut down.
With work continuing inside the factory, Scott's team must clear the Rosales home out of the way despite the weather to avoid jamming up the production line.
It's cold. Let's start winching.
Scott is nervous. His house shuttle wasn't built to work in these freezing conditions.
Obviously, visibility is quite a problem right now. And the fact it's so cold, my hydraulics are really slow. It doesn't have the action it usually has. Everything's delayed a few seconds just because of the temperature.
They've gritted the roads to ensure the shuttle doesn't slide off course and career into the banks of snow.
All right, where we at? We gotta be level and parallel, or we stand the risk of jumping off the track, which I probably don't need to explain would be bad. That's something I don't want to see. Got all them bolts out?
Yeah.
Are we looking for level?
Come up about 1 inch.
Sheila and Jessica Rosales arrive to receive the home delivery.
It is moving. Yeah, you can see it moving. Oh my gosh. That's pretty cool. 2 men to move one big house. That's awesome. So what'd you do today? I pulled a 60-ton house into place. Oh, it does look fantastic. It is so weird to think that you can have your house made and brought out and protected from all of this.
Special delivery.
It's getting home.
That should be good. How are you, Scott?
Yep.
Crane bolt these on the back of the deck, and then we'll chain her down. Let's go home.
There's this house in the sunset now, and and it wasn't there 2 hours ago.
It's amazing.
That's just amazing.
David's team now build, move, and bolt entire streets together in just a matter of months.
We developed this technology, but didn't know exactly what was going to happen till we were physically moving houses. And now as a company, with patents in place and communities being constructed, we're very excited about our future. House moving for us will become a daily activity. House moving is going to be taking on new dimensions.
Newbridge, Colorado, the fastest town in the West. On Vancouver Island, the homes are on their final leg of the journey. Victoria Marina is just a short tow away, and marina manager Roger is preparing for the latest shipment.
If you bring in the wrong house at the wrong time, then it's in your way. You can't work. And then if they start banging into each other, then we're in trouble. One false move and you could take out a whole wall on one of these houses.
It's been a long journey, and isn't it wonderful that it's finally here?
Roger guides in Deanna's house slowly. The route in is now surrounded by other float homes. There's no margin for error.
Hey, watch your back end now.
You've got to be awfully close to that house there. I don't think I'll watch for a little while. Well, look how close it's getting to that house as well. Yikes.
Get it out of there.
Yes, please.
I hope we're not hitting the corner.
Oh, you can never sweat. That is too close for comfort, fellas. Too close for comfort.
Whoops. Oh, Canada. Just the corner there and we hit the flag.
After a run-in with the neighbor's flagpost, Roger regains control of the house and slides it into position.
Hey, hey, hey! Good job. Oh, that was a little too close for comfort for my taste. I'm sure you knew what was happening, but when it swung over...
I think it's still running. I think it didn't quit.
Wait, watch the house there, buddy. Watch the house.
They secure the home in its mooring with steel posts driven deep into the seabed.
Hey. Welcome to my world. Won't you come on in? Look at this. Great, great.
Deanna steps aboard and waits for Ken to return from work.
Hello? Hello? Yeah?
Yes.
Hi, honey, I'm home.
Must give me a kiss. We did it. We made it. We got one.
Congratulations.
Oh! My stars. They never pop.
Oh, yeah, and the plan is for more, and we have actually a waiting list of people wanting to come on board. So, I mean, I think we're going to have a very vibrant, very great community here in a very short while.
It's a great sense of pride to see it finally coming together. It's very much a relief to see the float homes get there without any significant damage. All of the float home purchasers are also very content with their homes, so that's also another relief.
Over the coming months, a flotilla of aquatic homes arrives in Victoria Harbour, and West Bay Marine Village is finally born.